Under the glimmering chandeliers, a lavish ball unfolds, the aristocracy swayed by a hypnotic melody that weaves through the opulent hall. As the music fades, the gentleman bows respectfully to the princess, thanking her for the honor of the dance. But the moment he bids her farewell, her solitude is shattered by a chilling voice, asking if she's enjoying the festivities. Terror grips her heart as she spins around, instantly recognizing the cold, predatory presence of Duke Adler. Visibly displeased by her silence, his eyes darken, and he repeats the question, his aura pressing down on the trembling princess. Stammering, she explains that she only shared a dance with Archduke Killian because etiquette dictated the star of the evening must open the floor. Her excuse only seems to fuel his annoyance, his gaze narrowing into a dangerous glare that pierces right through her. Desperate to escape the suffocating tension, she laughs awkwardly, pointing out that they are attracting stares in the center of the room and suggests they take a seat. However, before she can make her retreat, the Duke's hand shoots out, barring her path. Adler forces her to face him, locking eyes with an intensity that promises no escape, and demands the next dance for himself. His dominating aura sends shivers down her spine, but she has no choice but to accept. And soon they are gliding across the floor, exchanging whispered words. With a deceptively calm voice, he questions her loyalty, asking why she was in the arms of another man if she truly fell for him at first sight. The princess frantically denies any impropriety, insisting she was merely ensuring the banquet proceeded without a hitch. Adler leans in dangerously close, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper as he reveals his dark, possessive nature regarding a woman's past. When the scent of another male lingers on you, he murmurs, I am seized by an urge to tear his very existence apart, leaving her paralyzed with fear. In this terrifying moment, there is one truth she must never forget. She has reincarnated into a romance novel where the man holding her is a serial killer destined to end her life. To make matters worse, fate has played a cruel joke. Her transmigration occurred at the worst possible moment, right as the king was reprimanding the princess for her tardiness. For Charlotte, music. The scolding was a whirlwind of confusion, as her soul had only just inhabited this body. Her father gave her no time to adjust, abruptly declaring that her engagement to the Duke would be announced the very next day, with the wedding to follow in 6 months. It was then that he introduced her betrothed Duke Arinius Von Adler. That name struck her like a bolt of lightning, unlocking a flood of memories and the realization of exactly which novel she had fallen into. It was a story she never had the luxury of reading, having perished from sheer exhaustion after working for 5 sleepless days and nights, only to awaken as the heroine of this twisted tragedy. Now, as Princess Vendetta Charlotte, she stands bewildered, trying to comprehend this new reality. Her fiancé snaps her back to the present with a greeting, appearing on the surface to be nothing more than a polite, handsome suitor. He remarks smoothly that this is their first formal introduction in the presence of His Majesty. Charlotte recoils instinctively, asking if his name is truly Adler, but her father cuts her off, demanding she show respect to her future husband. The king makes it crystal clear that any attempts to beg for a marriage to Archduke Killian will be met with absolute refusal. He scolds her for her lack of dignity, citing a recent tantrum she threw in his office, leaving Charlotte baffled as she has no memory of this obsession with Killian. Charlotte attempts to defend herself, stammering that she had no such intentions, but the emperor is merciless, warning that one more act of disobedience will result in her being stripped of her royalty forever. Desperate, she pleads for him to listen, but her father remains as immovable as a mountain, ordering the chamberlain to escort the couple to the parlor for a private audience, completely disregarding her stress. The young duke stands ready, waiting to usher them away. With perfect etiquette, he bids the emperor farewell, and soon they are in a private room. A spread of tea and pastries ignore the table. They sit opposite each other, and the atmosphere shifts instantly. The duke's warm facade dissolves into cold indifference. The princess watches him closely, unnerved by how drastically his demeanor has changed from the polite young man in the throne room. Suddenly, an object catches her eye. It is a newspaper proclaiming Duke Adler as the #1 most desirable man in the empire for the 3rd year running, citing his wealth, power, and stunning looks. The entire world is watching with bated breath to see which lucky woman will capture this perfect bachelor's heart. But Charlotte knows the grim truth. The lucky lady destined to marry this monster is her, Music, the empire's notorious delinquent princess. Irenaeus shattered the silence, his voice cold as steel. He addressed the elephant in the room. He knew she yearned for another. and this marriage was nothing but a sham neither desired. With a chilling finality, he declared their paths should not cross again until the wedding day itself, severing all contact effective immediately. Panic seized Charlotte's heart. To her ears, this was not a rejection but a death sentence. She was convinced that his veiled words meant her life would end the moment they were lawfully wed. He would dispose of her, and the world would turn a blind eye. After all, who would suspect the Empire's golden boy of cold-blooded monster? However, they did not know who they were dealing with. In her past life, she was a legendary prosecutor who clawed her way up from the slums to hunt down corruption. Her existence was defined by staring into the abyss of violent crime and murder investigations. If she wanted to survive this engagement, she had 6 months to unmask the serial killer before the wedding bells tolled. And the only way to catch a predator was to walk right into his lair. Steel herself, Charlotte cried out to stop him. With the skills of an award-winning actress, she confessed, "The truth is, your beauty captivated me instantly. I believe we must start dating immediately." The sudden confession hit him like a physical blow, choking on his tea. The bewildered Duke demanded to know what madness she was spouting. Charlotte doubled down, claiming love at first sight. She insisted on transforming this cold arrangement into a passionate romance, but Arinius was no fool. He saw right through her desperate performance. The entire capital knew the truth just this morning. She had been begging the Emperor on her knees to marry Archduke Kilian, the realm's most eligible bachelor. Yet, her father had remained unmoved by her tantrums. Lacking the original memories, our protagonist quickly deduced that this Archduke must have been the original princess's obsession. Clearly, her unrequited love had driven her to demand a forced marriage when her charms failed. Time for Plan B. She unleashed a wave of brazen flattery, claiming the Duke's divine face had erased all memory of any other man. Arinius looked at her as if she were insane, but she relentlessly praised his dazzling appearance. To seal her argument, she slammed down a newspaper, pointing to the pole that crowned him the Emperor's most desirable man. The tension was cut short as the herald announced the arrival of His Imperial Majesty. Charlotte switched gears instantly, beaming with joy as she thanked her father for choosing Duke Adler and unveiling her plan for romantic courtship. This was music to the Emperor's ears. He sighed in relief, believing his troublesome daughter had finally matured. He commanded Adler to cherish the princess. The Duke hesitated, asking if there was truly no issue with this arrangement. Forced into a corner, Arinius bowed and accepted his fate. Later, in the solitude of her chambers, Charlotte found she was not alone. A maid stood ready, prepared to assist her mistress. Having only read the prologue, Charlotte knew 2 things: she was now the villainous princess, and her fiancé was likely the serial killer terrorizing the capital. She was flying blind. She needed intel, and more importantly, she needed a loyal ally in this snake pit. Turning to the servant, she gently asked for her name. The maid bowed, introducing herself as Martha Hudson. Through subtle interrogation, the princess learned Martha had survived serving her for 4 long years. A heavy silence fell. The princess then asked the most dangerous question of all: "Who am I?" Confused but obedient, Martha replied, "You are Her Highness, Charlotte Van of the Asgard Empire." The protagonist scoffed internally at the grandiose title. She whispered the name, letting the foreign syllables roll off her tongue. She spun a tragic tale, claiming to have lost all memory of her life prior to yesterday. It was a gamble. She watched the maid's eyes, wondering if her lie would take root. Martha offered a logical excuse, blaming the memory loss on the princess's dramatic hunger strike and frail constitution. Tears welled in the maid's eyes as she cried out about the injustice of the royal physician ignoring her mistress. The protagonist realized the truth. The original Charlotte was a tyrant who drove servants away in droves. For Martha to remain for 4 years, she was either a saint or incredibly desperate. Seizing the moment, the princess held Martha's hands, feigning a deep bond she did not remember but desperately needed. She swore Martha to secrecy, explaining that her amnesia would be used by her enemies to destroy her. With a trembling voice, she whispered, "You are the only one I can trust." Martha pledged her undying loyalty instantly. "I will serve you with my life." But then, the maid innocently added that this wasn't the first time the princess had forgotten things. The realization struck hard. The original Villainess had simply gaslighted her staff whenever she made a mistake. Screaming, "I never ordered that, and who are you?" was just her standard method of abuse. I do not recall hiring a fool for a maid. Her cold words strike with undeniable truth. silencing Martha instantly. Charlotte pieces together the fragments of this body's tragic history. Her mother was the emperor's beloved mistress, a fragile soul who perished in childbirth. Out of lingering affection for the lost love, His Excellency granted Charlotte the title of princess, defying the venomous protests of the court. Yet, his mercy had its limits. He offered a title, not a father's love. He watched with indifference as the girl grew up in isolation. Naturally, the Empress and her children viewed her existence with utter contempt. To them, she is a living stain on their honor, the product of illicit desire. The nobility's gazes are just as cruel, silent judgments cutting like knives. Music. She is a princess in name only, wielding neither power nor allies in this viper's nest. Charlotte demands the truth behind her desperate hunger strike. The answer is pathetic. She was starving herself to force the emperor to sanction her marriage to Archduke Kilian, a man of lethal beauty, pale skin, raven hair, and crimson eyes like a vampire of legend. However, the man she worshipped viewed her delinquent antics with absolute loathing. The protagonist is stunned. To think the princess risked starving to death just to chase a man who looked at her with such disdain. Now, a new curiosity burns within her. What sin did Archduke Adler commit to deserve a bride with such a notorious reputation? Hunting for clues, the protagonist commands the delivery of last week's newspapers. Her request is fulfilled swiftly. In a world where the press thrives, knowledge is power, and this is her weapon. She suspected the recent serial killings would dominate the headlines, and she was right. The press feeds on fear. Her investigator's instincts flare to life. She scans every detail, searching for the hidden thread. She must decode the mystery of the 4 victims before she becomes the 8th corpse in this deadly game. Music. Eyes blazing with determination, she summons her ally. She requires a specific kind of assistance, and suddenly, the heavens open up, transforming the azure sky into a canvas of storm-gray gloom. As they march forward, Martha trembles, asking why they seek help among the condemned. The princess's reply is chillingly logical. Only a criminal is fit to serve a villainess. The answer sends a shiver down the innocent maid's spine. Martha's cousin, Stanford, emerges from the gloom. As a prison guard, he holds the keys to her desire. He orders the release of prisoner number 0221. The man appears, draped in heavy chains to suppress his lethality, leaving him no room to strike. Stanford issues a grave warning. This convict attacked a noble. The prisoner sneers, hoping the princess come to torture him for mere amusement. He knows his reputation well. They call him a mad dog who dares to bite even the aristocracy. Martha tries to shield her mistress, but her cousin intervenes, signaling her to stand down. Terrified, she explains that Jonathan Watson assaulted a superior officer, a grave crime against the nobility. She whispers that keeping such a beast nearby is flirting with death. But Charlotte is unmoved by fear, radiating authority. She orders the guards to withdraw, demanding a private audience. Her request is law. The princess clarifies her intent. She does not seek to harm him, but to purchase his absolute loyalty. Jonathan is bewildered. This insanity surpasses even his expectations. Charlotte plays her hand. She offers to pay his bail and vouch for his honor. The prisoner is no fool. He demands her motive, refusing to be a mere pawn in a noble's game. The princess rises, her voice steely. She has no interest in games. There is no trickery here. However, everything comes with a price. She reveals her hand. She is hunting the truth and requires a capable shadow for the coming months. Jonathan asks why she chose him. Her answer strikes home. She knows he was once a brilliant imperial investigator. If he accepts, he gains a position at the palace, a weekly salary, and his freedom. But the final blow is her promise to cover his mother's medical expenses. With a confident smile, she demands his answer. The mad dog grins back, the chains of defiance breaking. Shall I call you, Master? Later, the protagonist descends upon the library, causing instant chaos. A young man leaps up in sheer panic, begging for mercy at the sight of her. Charlotte asks coolly if a princess in a library is such a rare sight. Music. She declares this will become a common occurrence. He best prepare himself, for she has many questions that demand answers. The royal librarian, eager to please royalty, bowed low before accepting her daunting list of demands. In the blink of an eye, a mountain of books rose upon the table, delivered with a speed that earned him her sincere gratitude. Charlotte dove into the imperial lineage, memorizing every noble name, ancient law, An historical record she had to match instantly, for her very survival depended on it. Another sun rose over the empire, and the princess awoke, refreshed from a slumber deep enough to heal her soul. In her past life, she could have conquered sleepless nights without fatigue, but this fragile vessel was far weaker than her true self. Suddenly, Sir Watson's arrival was announced. He cut a striking figure of elegance, admitting that mere days ago, serving the notorious imperial princess would have been an impossible nightmare. Charlotte laughed at the title of master, urging him to drop the stiff etiquette when they were alone together. He bowed to her wishes, agreeing to discard the suffocating honorifics to please her. After all, he was now her trusted assistant. A silent pact was formed between them. In the shadows of the palace, formalities would only slow them down, but business came first. She handed him a secret, ordering him to incinerate it the moment the task was done. Jonathan unfolded the note, his eyes widening. Was she truly seeking intelligence on the serial murders? Charlotte's gaze was steely. She needed every detailed record available. She knew the key to this mystery. What set this killer apart was the signature left behind, a twisted habit engraved at every crime scene like a calling card. To decode these macabre clues, she needed those case files in her hands. Suddenly, a maid burst in urgent news. The emperor demanded the princess's presence at the morning banquet immediately. Charlotte's blood ran cold. This was no simple fail. It was a weekly tribunal where the emperor scrutinized his offspring. It was a gathering of apex predators and high officials, where His Excellency judged his children's worth, testing who was truly fit to inherit the Iron Throne. Music. To be clear, Charlotte was usually essentially invisible here, ranking dead last in the line of succession. While our protagonist panicked, realizing this ambush wasn't part of her script, Martha beamed with greed. If the princess impressed her father, their budget might finally increase. The maid practically shoved her out the door, reminding her that hiring Jonathan had already drained their coffers dry. Her entrance was heralded. Music. Every head swiveled to stare at the disgrace of the family. The emperor's gaze was heavy, his voice sharp as he noted her tardiness. Curtsied, apologizing smoothly while noting she was only summoned moments ago. Her brother sneered instantly, suggesting the maids failed to read the invitation aloud to her. Camilla joined the assault, laughing that she had never seen her sister hold a book, let alone read one. The protagonist recognized them instantly, the two villains from the novel who despised Charlotte. But they were dealing with a different soul now. She simply smiled, feigning ignorance, and asked, "Oh, is that so?" Her indifference enraged them. Frederick snapped, asking if she was deaf as well as illiterate. She merely nodded to every insult, unbothered. The emperor, bored by their petty squabbles, silenced the room. His Excellency revealed the true reason for the summons. Duke Adler was in attendance. Their upcoming union was, after all, a matter of imperial importance. Camilla scoffed, remarking that Charlotte's hunger strike had at least made her thin enough to catch a man, since she had switched her obsession from Killian to Duke Adler without a shred of shame. Another voice chimed in, jeering that her lightness wasn't physical, but a complete lack of intelligence and class, drawing cruel laughter from the court. Her siblings sneered that her head was filled with nothing but flowers. Camilla watched for a reaction, but Charlotte's vacant, sunny smile remained, frustrated, bullied to no end. Charlotte turned her gaze to her betrothed, but the Duke offered nothing but a cold, stony stare, making her wonder what darkness lurked behind those eyes. Undeterred, she shot him a playful, dazzling wink. The shot caused Arinius to choke violently on his tea. The council, however, pressed on. The debate turned to the harvest, a surplus so vast it threatened to crash the wheat market. One prince proposed burning the fields to artificially inflate value, while another argued for exporting the grain to neighboring lands. A noble voice cut through the noise, suggesting that it has been an eternity since Charlotte graced the court with her presence, and when asked for her opinion, a heavy sigh escapes her lips. Her siblings sneer, fully expecting her to fail. Frederick warns her that if she intends to pray to the god of harvest again, she best keep her mouth shut. She knows deep down she will never inherit the throne, so her original plan was to fade into the background and endure their foolishness in silence. But their ignorance has tested her patience. Charlotte declares that neither of their suggestions holds water, shocking them both into silence. She states the cold, hard truth: destroying the wheat fields with the imperial army would only ignite a rebellion among the commoners. Frederick bristles with irritation at being corrected. Their logic is fundamentally flawed. Her brother's perspective is too narrow. blinding him to everything except basic supply and demand prices. While Camilla's idea held a spark of promise, free trade is a fantasy of the modern world. This empire was built on conquest and vassal states to secure its independence. Therefore, the reckless suggestion of freely exporting wheat would be a strategic nightmare. Camilla snaps back, challenging her sister to find a single crack in her reasoning. Music. Charlotte delivers the killing blow. Neighboring nations could repurpose that wheat as military rations to fuel a war against the empire. It is just as foolish as Frederick's plan. With a mocking tone, she concludes, "If that happens, perhaps we should pray to the god of war to save us then." Charlotte rises from her seat, commanding the room's attention. Her solution is elegant abandon wheat cultivation and subsidize the farmers to grow fruits and vegetables instead, naturally curbing the supply. It is the fundamental theory of supply and demand from microeconomics, and luckily, the protagonist aced that course in her previous life, so she is unbeatable in this arena. Camilla jumps up in a rage, hurling insults and calling her sister too stupid to understand agriculture, questioning if she truly believes and new crops can simply thrive in the old fields. With a confident smirk, music, Charlotte drops her ace card, barley. The suggestion catches her sister completely off guard. Her master plan is to brew alcohol from the barley and export it, a luxury good that poses no military threat. The emperor ponders the strategy and realizes the brilliance behind it. Her father stares in shock, admitting he never knew Charlotte possessed such a sharp political mind. But of course, this brilliance only fuels her enemy's hatred. To their absolute horror, decrees that from this moment on, youngest daughter shall attend the morning banquet every single week. Thus, the session concludes. But the tension lingers as the two sisters cross paths in the hallway. Music. Camilla seizes the moment to hiss a warning, telling her not to get arrogant over a stroke of blind luck. Charlotte feigns innocence once more, thinking to herself that compared to the hardened criminal she used to hunt, royalty are surprisingly gentle even when trying to insult her. Her siblings depart from the dining hall, fading into irrelevance. She has a much darker objective to focus on now. As she turns to leave, destiny crosses her path yet again. It is her fiancé. And suspect number one, with a deceptive smile, she asks if he remembers their engagement. Charlotte steps into his personal space, reminding him of their meeting scheduled for later that day. Later, the two share a private moment under the golden sun, surrounded by lush trees and tea, just like before. But the atmosphere has shifted. This time, his gaze is piercing, openly observing her every move. Charlotte asks for his full name, and the Duke obliges, demanding hers in return. The protagonist inwardly groans at these ridiculously long titles. She asks to call him Renius, but he coldly denies the request. Music. She tries to bridge the gap by suggesting he call her by her first name, but Adler shuts that down as well. Charlotte smiles, purring that they really should take things slow, before mentioning she has a few questions for him. Suddenly, the spirit of her past life as a detective takes over. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Arinius looks visibly confused, and the girl realizes she slipped back into her old habits. Charlotte scrambles to come up with a better excuse, music, and explains that she simply wants to know him better, claiming that as he knows she fell in love with him at first sight. Adler raises a skeptical eyebrow, asking if that is truly how a princess looks at her beloved. Charlotte asking if he cannot see the fire in her eyes. To be precise, it is the burning desire to catch a murderer. Remaining unfazed, the Duke simply lifts his teacup, hiding his expression. And to be fair, the protagonist has to admit, even if he is a criminal, the man is exactly her type. Arinius accepts the challenge, granting her permission to ask whatever her heart desires, swearing a solemn vow to offer nothing but the absolute truth. Charlotte steels herself for the first strike. This is not a simple conversation. It is a ruthless interrogation masked as romance. She prays her fiancé is prepared, for she intends to tear his defenses apart. She launches her opening gambit with a question that pierces straight to the heart. Who was the Duke's first love? The interrogation drags on, and she extracts the basic facts. He is 27 years old, a distinguished graduate of the Empire's military academy, with one younger sister and a father who passed away under mysterious circumstances. Yet, he stubbornly claims no history of romance, a void that makes Arinius suspect why she is digging so deep. Charlotte insists that knowing her man's history is vital for their future. The possessive way she calls him her man seems to rattle his composure, but in the cold logic of a murder investigation, the motive is everything. A suspect's shadows often hold the darkest secrets, making his history the key to unlocking the truth. If a man murdered his bride on their very wedding night, logic dictates a secret lover was waiting in the wings. The protagonist weighs the dark ability. Perhaps the Duke loved another and was forced by the Emperor to wed his youngest daughter against his will. Did he commit the crime out of sheer spite, sensing her probing intent? Duke Adler fixes her with a piercing gaze, warning her that she is in no position to judge anyone's past. Charlotte just laughs it off, claiming she has severed all ties with her own turbulent history. And in a twisted sense, she isn't lying. She declares that her fiancé is the only thing occupying her mind now, leaving Arinius visibly shaken by her intensity. The princess attempts to lower his guard, weaving a web of false comfort. She assures him there is no need for secrets, painting herself as a woman who embraces every scar of her lover's past. Yet, he stands firm like an iron wall. He insists there was never a first love, indifferent to whether she believes his words, for they are the cold, hard truth. Charlotte seizes the opening, pressing closer. She asks if she is destined to be the first and the last woman to hold his heart. Arinius confirms it without hesitation, asking if his purity offends her. It is baffling that the Empire's most coveted bachelor has never been tainted by romance. Suddenly, the tables turn. Now, it is Duke Adler who demands an answer. The young nobleman notes that she is known for her terrifying persistence once she sets her sights on a target. He asks if he can expect that same relentless devotion. Charlotte realizes instantly he speaks of her infamous obsession with Killian. The mere thought of being the new victim of her madness clearly makes his skin crawl. However, the danger here is far more lethal. If she focuses that razor-sharp attention on her fiancé, she might just expose him as a cold-blooded killer. Arinius demands to know the reason for this sudden shift in affection. He asks, point blank, "What exactly did you see in me?" Despite masking her panic with a playful smile, the protagonist has absolutely no idea how to respond. Caught off guard, she falls back on her classic excuse, love at first sight. She asks if passion requires any proof beyond the beating of a heart. Duke Adler is relentless. He demands specifics about what captured her soul. Since he is supposedly her ideal type, the words should flow easily, should they not? Cold sweat threatens to break via Charlotte's composure. If she falters now, his suspicion will turn into certainty. Desperately, she lists his attributes: hair radiating like the morning sun, blue eyes as deep as a crystal clear lake, and porcelain skin that rivals the finest art. She praises his noble nose, sculpting his face like a living statue, and the allure of his full lips. She gushes over his broad shoulders, his imposing height, and his sculpted physique. She mentions his voice sweet yet chilling, and his elegant aura with such perfection. How could she not fall instantly in love? Charlotte pours out these compliments, while screaming internally that it all sounds like a fabricated lie. Arinius simply absorbs the barrage of praise with a stoic response, "I see." The psychological warfare finally concludes. Martha rushes in, worried to find Her Highness collapsed on the bed, but the princess claims she is merely drained of all mental and physical strength. The dark-haired maid interrupts the respite. She informs her that Jonathan has arrived, offering to send him away given her mistress's fragile state. Martha realizes Charlotte is in no condition to present herself in the formal sitting room, and the girl weakly agrees. But this visitor holds the key to the investigation. He cannot be dismissed. The princess makes a bold command, "Bring him to my bedchamber." Martha freezes in shock. Charlotte reminds her that it was Martha herself who declared her unfit to walk elsewhere. Besides, her reputation is already in tatters. Bringing a man to her room cannot possibly tarnish a name that is already dragged through the mud. As soon as Sir Watson enters the sanctuary, the protagonist apologizes for the impropriety, explaining that her exhaustion has bound her to this room. The young knight understands the urgency and produces the treasure requested that very morning. It is the holy grail of her investigation, a copy of the Imperial Police records. She stares in awe, asking how he pulled off such a feat. Jonathan offers a sly smile, calling it a trade secret, but the document speaks for itself, containing terrifyingly precise details. The first victim fell 16 weeks ago, a 20-year-old governess from Count Morstan's residence, brutally slaughtered in the light of a weekday afternoon. The second tragedy struck just 1 week later. It claimed a 30-year-old man, the head chef of the prestigious Shalto Steakhouse. He was found strangled by a rope within his own sanctuary late at night. Rewind 10 weeks to the third victim, a 40-year-old woman who ran a humkery beloved by the common folk. She met the same twisted fate while walking to volunteer on a weekend morning. The final piece of this grim puzzle appeared 8 weeks ago. A man of the same age, the secretary to Marquis Dust, an imperial official, the Reaper found him near his home in the early hours of dawn. Every single one of them met their end at the mercy of a rope. Jonathan presents the profile. The suspect is a male in peak physical condition, 180 centimeters tall with military discipline. But are these killings random? Or is there a hidden pattern? One fact remains undeniable. Duke Adler is a man of exceptional fitness and a graduate of the Imperial Military Academy. Yet, the Empire is full of men cast from that mold. This is not enough to condemn the blonde nobleman. Charlotte's mission is clear. She must uncover the motive and the method. She presses for forensic evidence. Is it too late to examine the crime scenes or the remains? The last incident was 2 months ago. Jonathan confirms the grim reality. The scenes are scrubbed, and the bodies have returned to dust. Only the paperwork remains to aid the princess. Jonathan pauses, questioning Her Highness's true intent. Why is she diving into this darkness? She offers only her signature enigma. It is a trade secret. The young informant shrugs. He is merely a tool for the job. The reason is irrelevant to him. He asks for his next command. Charlotte drops the bombshell. Investigate Duke Adler. The informant smirks, unsurprised. Is he not your beloved fiancé? Surely you know the man better than anyone. The former criminal teases. Is she perhaps jealous of the Duke's affairs with other women? Charlotte commands a deep dive. She wants to know everything. The more scandalous and private, the better. Jonathan agrees to dig up the dirt. The protagonist guards her secrets closely. Even if the world finds out, she has the perfect shield. She can simply blame it on her reputation as a wicked villainess. A summons has already been dispatched to Duke Adler. The game is afoot. The scene shifts to the blonde nobleman's residence. He is buried in his work within his office. His secretary interrupts the silence. A letter arrives, and the Duke knows exactly who sent it. Charlotte has been bombarding him with missives every single day since their last encounter. Arinius breaks the seal. Amidst flowery declarations of missing his handsome face, the girl demands yet another audience. Back at the Imperial Palace, Martha bursts into the room, beaming with joy. She presents a reply from Arinius. The princess is genuinely impressed. Her cold fiancé has been ignoring her for ages. Has he finally had a change of heart? The letter sets the stage. A meeting at the Opera House at 7 post-meridiem. A wave of relief washes over her. She was moments away from abusing her father's authority to force his hand. Thankfully, she did not have to resort to tyranny. Martha is practically vibrating with excitement. She urges Her Highness to move. The preparations must begin immediately. Her excitement is so intense, she nearly forgets court etiquette. The fated hour finally arrives. The Duke appears, and he is breathtaking. His attire is impeccable, drawing a sigh of admiration from his fiancée. Charlotte attempts a tease. She claims she once mistook him for a statue in this very hall, but her wit hits a wall of silence. A chill runs through her. The protagonist realizes this investigation will be a battlefield. The Duke turns his back, marching toward the hall without waiting for her. The performance waits for no one. Arinius notes coldly, "This is the most coveted show in the Empire. Tickets are rare." Meanwhile, Charlotte wonders why he even agreed to meet. If the air between them remains this frozen, what does it mean? The venue is shrouded in darkness. She cannot read his expressions. The environment is hostile to conversation. She is trapped. She has no choice but to endure the opera until the final curtain. To make matters worse, Adler draws a line in the sand. He is not to be disturbed. Charlotte counters with charm. She would rather gaze at him than this. A friendly chat would bring her far more joy than any song. Her true wish is simple. She needs a private setting to properly interrogate him. But the Duke shuts it down. He cannot entertain her whims every day. They cannot meet constantly. He explains that his duty comes first. He can only grant her an audience once a week. Charlotte feigns a heartbroken expression. Arinius relents, slightly. He increases the offer to twice a week, but not a second more. Despite claiming she wants him daily, the princess smiles. That will suffice. After music all, this fleeting moment of peace is all she truly needs. Charlotte is already plotting to whisk him away to a more private sanctuary next time, but lost in her own schemes, the girl drifts into a deep slumber and only wakes when the curtain has long since fallen. She jolts awake, her heart pounding as the reality of the situation crashes down on her. The once dim theater is now flooded with harsh light, revealing an empty hall where only the cleaning staff remains among the debris. Panic sets in as she realizes the performance must have ended quite some time ago. Charlotte stammers out an apology, claiming insomnia has plagued her lately, all while trembling at the thought that she dared to doze off on the shoulder of a man destined to kill her. Resentment boils within her. The Grand Duke must surely believe she lacks all class and elegance. Suddenly, Arinius leans in with a sharp question, asking if he is the reason she sleep. Recalling the honeyed words written in her letter, Charlotte plays her part perfectly, confirming that thoughts of him haunt her every waking night. The young man stands up in a sudden flush of haste, promising to notify her of their next meeting before awkwardly wishing her a good night's rest. With a stiff farewell, he turns and leaves her standing there alone. This cold attitude clearly does not sit well with the princess. A few days drift by until an invitation to a debutante ball arrives at her doorstep. Charlotte asks Martha to read the contents, and the maid's eyes widen as she notes that Archduke Killian will likely be in attendance. Music. The dark-haired maid hesitates, asking if they should really accept, her mind drifting to her mistress's former flame. But the princess scoffs at the memory. She has no interest in that man, for her gaze is now locked entirely on her dangerous fiancé. Poor Martha has no idea just how mistaken she truly is. The servant moves to write a refusal letter to the Morstan household, but the mere mention of that name strikes a chord in the protagonist's mind. Then the maid explains that the ball is in honor of the Count's daughter, Lady Marilyn Morstan. Music. Charlotte demands to see the letter immediately. Serial killings usually follow a strict rhythm, a macabre tempo that rarely varies. But the cold case she's investigating defies all logic and follows no such pattern. The murders occurred 16, 15, 10, and 8 weeks ago, and it disturbs her deeply that the last interval passed without a fresh corpse. Meanwhile, seeing her mistress lost in deep thought, Martha assumes she is still pining over Archduke Killian. But, returning to the protagonist's sharp deduction, documents from Jonathan reveal that the very first victim was the governess of the Morstan estate. Seeing that the crimes lack a temporal pattern, she concludes that this monster does not kill on a whim. He strikes only when he has a motive. She realizes that if she visits the place where he lived, music, she might uncover the hidden threads of his reasoning. She quickly turns to Martha and declares that she has changed her mind. Charlotte announces that she will attend the debutante ball after all. This delights the servant, who gushes that it will be the princess's first encounter with Killian since the engagement, praying she looks breathtaking for the reunion. And once again, Charlotte coldly clarifies that her heart holds nothing for that young man. Suddenly, the dark-haired maid's face falls as she remembers a catastrophic detail. Her Highness has absolutely nothing suitable to wear. This baffles Charlotte, who marches to her wardrobe to inspect the vast collection she possesses. Her eyes sweep over the rows of elaborate garments hanging there. Martha, in utter disbelief, asks if she intends to wear any of those disasters, suggesting that while it is the princess's style, sanity might be a better choice for this event. To Charlotte, the dresses simply seem bright and lively, and she cannot grasp what the girl is implying. This triggers a hysterical scream from Martha that echoes so loudly. The maids outside pity the poor girl for having to deal with such a delinquent mistress. Inspecting the options, she finds a snow-white gown dripping with beads that looks suspiciously like a wedding dress. Another is a scandalous scarlet piece with a plunging neckline and open back, while yet another is a lace explosion resembling a giant mound of cotton candy. Martha the amnesia, reminding the girl that she bought these flashy monstrosities solely to demand Killian's attention. The protagonist stares at the clothes, thinking that, besides being flashy, they are utter madness and not her style at all. However, Charlotte spots one seems slightly less offensive than the rest. But that very dress was worn to Lady Irina's wedding, where she had even donned a veil to complete the chaotic look. Hearing this horror story, Charlotte demands to know why not a single soul stopped her from committing such a fashion crime. But poor Kate met a cruel fate when she begged her only to leave the veil behind. The princess resolves to simply buy a new gown, but Martha grimly reminds her that their entire budget was drained by the bail money in hiring Sir Watson. Desperate for a solution, Charlotte watches as the dark-haired maid reaches into the wardrobe to pull out the only wearable option left in existence. She reveals the dress to the princess, who recoils in sheer horror, refusing to wear such a thing. Meanwhile, our protagonist finds herself trapped in yet another tense encounter with her beloved villain. Music. Charlotte turns to the golden-haired Duke, telling him that if his schedule is full, he is under no obligation to be her escort for the grand ball. Her words freeze him in his tracks. Arinius demands to know why she sent that letter of missive she has absolutely no memory of writing. The Duke produces the crumpled note from his pocket. Inside is not just a scandalous declaration of love, but a request for a clandestine meeting. Seeing the paper crushed in his grip, Charlotte's heart sinks. She assumes the contents must have deeply offended his noble sensibilities. So, she boldly claims she was merely pouring out her heart, asking innocent-eyed if there is any crime in expressing true affection. Arinius pierces her with a gaze, asking if her love is genuine. With a dazzling smile, the princess proclaims to the skies, heaven, music, earth, and even the glittering chandeliers of the palace know the depths of my love for you. Duke Adler. Arinius counters sharply. Then why insist I abandon my duty as your partner for the debutante ball? Charlotte blinks, confused, having thought she was doing him a favor. Paranoia instantly claws at her mind. She fears this dangerous man has realized her ulterior motives, and suspects he wants to keep her from prying into his dark secrets at the event. Forcing a smile, Charlotte claims she simply couldn't bear to force the man she adores into an uncomfortable situation on her behalf. The Duke's expression darkens with irritation. He states coldly that he never once voiced any discomfort regarding the matter. He declares his intent to attend, warning that failing to escort his own fiancé would shatter his reputation within society. Realizing the blonde noble cares only for his public image, the princess smiles with relief, feigning excitement for their shared evening. However, she hesitantly admits there is a slight complication regarding her attire. Charlotte steels herself before dropping the bombshell question. Would it trouble you if I revealed a bit of cleavage that night? Arinius is caught completely off guard. He stammers, asking if she truly intends to wear such a scandalous, immodest gown before the entire court. Charlotte finally confesses the humiliating truth: her palace lacks the budget to afford a proper new gown. She insists she despises the idea as well. Arinius' expression hardens, and he steps back in silence. Music. Leaving Charlotte to believe her fiancé now sees her as a woman lacking all class and dignity. More days, music, drift by until the morning of the banquet arrives. Martha, assisting her mistress, whispers a prayer for good fortune. Charlotte calms her, radiating confidence. Her true mission today is to secure the funds her palace so desperately needs. With her resolve hardened like steel, she marches toward the chamber where the council convenes. Rage simmers beneath her surface. It is absurd that a princess of her standing receives such a pitiful allowance. Today, she will force the emperor to see her worth, but the thought comes when Duke Adler, present for the meeting, actually greets her first. Yet, as she tries to avoid his gaze, something elsewhere captures her attention. Her sister screams in fury. She berates the staff, demanding to know why the head chef ignored her severe nut allergy, ordering the dish removed instantly. The trembling servant explains that the head chef is away to a sudden family emergency. Unmoved and vicious, Camilla commands the maid to eat the poisoned pancakes herself. Meanwhile, the banquet officially begins. The servant hurriedly removes the offending dish, withering under the princess's hateful glare. The topic shifts to a grave crisis: the dwindling supply of mana stones and mages, and the Empire's desperate need for a solution. Charlotte is thunderstruck. No one ever mentioned that magic actually existed in this world. She decides to play it safe, planning to listen to her siblings' answers first to formulate her own. But fate has a cruel twist in store. Since she dominated the previous debate, the Emperor points to her, demanding she start the discussion immediately. As a servant brings a replacement dish for the petulant Princess Camilla, the Emperor ignores the domestic drama, eyes fixed on Charlotte. Charlotte's blood runs cold. She has no answer, and she fears her previous success will be exposed as sheer luck. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream shatters the air, and a body hits the floor. The servant writhes in agony, white foam spilling from her lips, leaving Camilla paralyzed with horror. As the woman convulses on the cold stone, the court freezes in terror. But Charlotte springs into action, rushing to the victim's side. Ignoring Camilla's confusion, Charlotte performs a rapid medical assessment of the dying body. Purple lips, red blotches on the skin, and the unmistakable scent of bitter almonds on her breath. She spins around, her voice booming with authority, ordering that absolutely nothing in the dining hall be touched. She warns them to keep everything away from their mouths and noses amidst the chaos. Her eyes lock onto one person. Her gaze lands on Duke Adler. But she knows this isn't his style. This poison is far too subtle to be the work of her golden-haired villain. With a heavy sigh that echoes through the hall, Charlotte unveils the terrifying truth. It is cyanide, a deadly poison meant to silence the banquet guests forever. Chaos instantly erupts. Guards bar the exits, trapping the terrified guests inside. Whispers of suspicion spread like wildfire, every noble eyeing their neighbor with distrust. A gallant knight bows, thanking the princess for averting a catastrophe that could have shaken the empire. An investigation begins immediately. The results are chilling. Traces of cyanide lace the powdered sugar atop the pancakes, and death hides even within the kitchen salt shaker. Charlotte humbly claims it was mere fortune, but her mind races back to the events prior. She recalls the servant girl fulfilling her duties. A shadow had sprinkled the deadly dust onto the feast. Tragically, the servant, hating to be wasteful, sampled a morsel from the plate. That single bite sealed her fate. The princess questions if the sous chef is truly the mastermind. This is because the head chef was suspiciously absent, leaving his subordinate in charge. The knight reports that the man staunchly denies the crime, pleading his innocence with desperation in his eyes. With no other options, the guards prepare to use force to extract a confession, but Charlotte sees through the web of lies. The true culprit is the head chef. His excuse of a family emergency rings hollow in her ears. She argues with cold logic. Only the head chef controls the weekly menu and holds the keys to the kitchen's supply of sugar and salt. The princess is certain the trap was set long before he vanished. In this empire, such spices are worth their weight in gold. A mere sous chef would never have the authority to touch them. Her command rings out, arrest him before he escapes. The knight stands frozen, the brilliance of her deduction striking him like lightning. Snapping to attention, he rallies the guards to hunt down the head chef before the trail goes cold. Just as predicted, the traitor is intercepted at the border. He was no chef, but a deep-cover spy from the Curtain Republic, hiding in plain sight. A nation conquered 7 years ago, now a vassal state seething with resentment and rebellion against the empire. Though the assassination failed, the consequences are devastating. A bloody purge sweeps through the imperial palace for 3 agonizing days. Heads roll for those who missed the spy's presence. Yet, amidst the chaos, Charlotte secures favor exactly as she had orchestrated. It deviated slightly from her script, but His Majesty's delight is tangible. He rewards her brilliance by doubling her budget instantly. Later, the princess seeks the quiet sanctuary of the royal library. Amidst her studies, she reflects on the triumph. She smiles, recalling Martha's joy at the secured funds, praying this stroke of luck continues. Time slips away until the shadows grow long and deep. Unaccustomed to such late hours, a prickle of unease touches her spine. Though she dismisses the danger, Charlotte begins her lonely trek back, guided only by the pale moonlight. A sudden rustle in the dark freezes the blood in her veins. Panic sets in. What if the chef was not alone? What if other assassins still lurk in the palace shadows? Knowing how many enemies wish for her downfall, she accelerates, her heart pounding against her ribs. Disaster strikes. She stumbles over a stone and crashes to the cold earth, defenseless and terrified. A scream tears from her throat. Help arrives in a heartbeat. It is Jonathan. He rushes to her side, sword hand ready, asking frantically if she is being pursued. He reaches out, his voice thick with worry for her safety. Charlotte scrambles up and collapses into his protective embrace. She trembles like a leaf, deepening the knight's concern. Suddenly, the bushes rustle again to reveal a tiny, adorable kitten. This was her terrifying pursuer. Safely back inside, the tension breaks. Jonathan chuckles heartily, teasing that the fearless princess was defeated by a stray cat. Flustered and annoyed, she spins around. She defends her dignity, insisting the darkness play tricks on her senses. Demanding he cease his laughter, she steers the conversation back to serious matters. She asks for the results of his secret investigation. The former convict grins, offering to start with the juicy details. Pulling up a chair, he tells her to get comfortable. His findings are frustratingly perfect. Duke Adler's private life is spotless. Not a single scandal or woman involved, which Jonathan jokes is a waste of such a handsome face. But romance is the least of her concerns. Moving to the dark truth, he reveals that the Duke's father is a different story entirely. Arinius hides a complex past. His biological mother perished 5 years ago from a wasting sickness, making the current Duchess his stepmother. Sensing a weakness, Charlotte presses for details on their family dynamic. The relationship is icy at best. However, the Duke possesses one weakness. He absolutely adores his younger sister, Lady Blair, his last true blood relative. Her curiosity does not end there. She presses for the truth regarding why the Duke shunned the Imperial Army after his academy graduation. However, that remains a shroud of mystery that only Irenaeus himself can unveil. Whispers of speculation had run wild, as service in the Imperial Army is the golden ticket to social ascension within Asgard. The Emperor, fueled by a thirst for conquest, bestows lavish rewards and status upon his loyal soldiers. Thus, the Duke's refusal is beyond strange. It casts a long, ominous shadow of suspicion over his true motives. Diving into the heart of the darkness, Jonathan drops a bombshell. The Adler household's governess was the very first victim of the serial killer they are hunting. A spark of intrigue ignites within Charlotte. She needs to know every single detail. Yet, Jonathan cannot resist a moment of teasing. Questioning how a woman who shrieks in terror at a mere stray cat plans to hunt a bloodthirsty murderer. The princess bristles at the accusation, insisting she fears no beast, claiming it was the suffocating darkness that caught her off guard. Sir Watson interjects with a logical question, wondering why a lady of her stature lacks a personal knight for protection. Martha reveals the absurd truth. Charlotte dismissed every guard simply because their faces could not compare to the handsome Lord Killian. The man nearly weeps at such a shallow justification, but the irritated princess defends herself, claiming she was on the verge of hiring replacements anyway. Seizing the moment, Jonathan steps forward with a charming proposal. Then how about I become your shield, your highness? With the pact sealed, Martha sternly warns Sir Watson to guard the princess with his life as they escort her toward the boutique. Escaping the treacherous stairs, the new bodyguard questions his presence here, but the heat is sweltering, and Charlotte desperately needs guidance for the perfect gown. Martha is taken aback, surprised that this man has the audacity to offer his fashion critiques. Leaning in close, Charlotte whispers a frantic warning to her maid, reminding her that Jonathan is providing his lethal protection for free, a detail the little brat had nearly forgotten. Suddenly shifting gears, Martha beams a radiant smile, praising Jonathan for his impeccable service. A shop assistant approaches with bad news, with Lady Morin's debutante ball imminent. The finest gowns have already been snatched up. Martha laments their timing, regretting that they did not arrive sooner. But the princess remains unfazed. She demands the most modest and conservative dress left on the racks. The assistant stands paralyzed in shock, unable to reconcile this request with Charlotte's notorious reputation for flamboyant fashion. Meanwhile, the protagonist motions for her companions to rest, while Jonathan admits he is completely out of his element in such a feminine sanctuary. The girl declares the fashion show has begun, instructing them to judge each outfit she tries on. The first option is a somber dark blue, which Martha immediately rejects for failing to capture the princess's radiant beauty. To Jonathan, the second dress is a disaster, making her look like a cupcake drowning in excessive icing and lace. Charlotte emerges from the fitting room to reveal the next contender. It is a catastrophe so vile that horror is etched onto their faces, sending the disappointed girl back inside while her guard and maid demand answers from the staff. They grill the shop assistant, wondering how a boutique could stock such hideous garments. Finally, after an agonizing wait, Charlotte steps out in a masterpiece that Martha deems absolute perfection. The azure gown hugs her form as if destiny stitched it. Even Jonathan is struck speechless, murmuring that she looks like a descent from the heavens, before awkwardly correcting himself to say she simply looks human. He gently takes her hand, his demeanor shifting from judge to protector. His eyes narrow as he advises her to eat more, his gaze lingering on the fresh scratches that still mar her palm from the previous night. Charlotte smiles softly, assuring him that while she may look fragile, her spirit is stronger than steel, begging him not to worry. Breaking the tension, the princess turns to the staff and declares that this is the chosen dress. The tailor promises to adjust it to her perfect measurements and have it delivered directly to the palace walls. As the trio strolls through the city, they pass a sweet shop and overhear young ladies gossiping that both Killian and Adler will grace the upcoming ball. The girls giggle with excitement, placing bets on which unfortunate soul will become the next target of obsession in this romantic spectacle. The black-haired woman sneers, mocking the distress one must feel having such a notorious figure becoming their sister-in-law. Their cruel laughter is cut short the moment they realize the princess herself is standing right behind them. Panic sets in as the three girls scramble to leave, but Charlotte stops them cold, suggesting they stay for tea instead. After all, fate does not bring them together like this every day, and the protagonist senses a golden opportunity to gather intelligence. Probing into their connection with Lady Morstan, Charlotte receives only idle gossip about the girls' romantic entanglement with Lord Henry. Digging for the origin of their bond, the conversation shifts to House Fragonard, the renowned perfumers who would naturally invest in such connections. It becomes clear that these three women belong to families loyal to Camilla, acting as her devoted pawns in this social chess game. Forced by royal protocol, the ladies accepted the tea invitation, though their eyes betrayed a cold reluctance to engage with Charlotte. The air was thick with superficial chatter as the girls discussed investments. Their greed evident as they plotted to use contract benefits to fund their own salons. Charlotte's curiosity piqued at their scheme, but before she could probe deeper, the escape plan began. One stood up abruptly, feigning a sudden dinner engagement with her mother that simply could not wait. Like dominoes falling, they urged Lady Blair to follow suit, each crafting a hollow excuse to flee, bowing with fake reverence before leaving the princess in isolation. Silence fell over the room. Charlotte had gleaned absolutely zero useful intelligence, blocked by their constant interruptions. Only Blair remained. Bowing with genuine grace to apologize for the abrupt departure, the young noblewoman turned to escape. Destiny intervened as the princess firmly grasped her arm. Charlotte's expression shifted to deadly serious. She cut through the pleasantries, warning Blair not to invest a single coin in Lady Christina's perfume venture, explicitly declaring it a trap. Fear flickered in the girl's eyes as she asked. The princess dismantled the scheme without a product launch. Such guaranteed profits were a mathematical impossibility, a glaring red flag. Furthermore, they offered no tangible proof, only empty promises. Charlotte, a veteran of past lives and deceptions, knew the universal truth guaranteed astronomical returns are the hallmark of a scam. Her voice softened but held firm authority. It may be trust my words, but for your own sake, do not invest. She raised the stakes, vowing that if the business actually succeeded, she would personally pay Blair the lost profits, a gamble that left Blair stunned by Her Highness's conviction. With a radiant smile, Charlotte sealed the pact, confessing she could not bear to see her future family suffer. The sincerity pierced Lady Blair's defenses, and she lowered her head, genuinely moved by this unexpected protection. Music. Seizing the emotional opening, the princess proposed a trade if her advice saved Blair from ruin. She wanted information on her brother Duke Adler, craving to know the man behind the engagement. Unaware of the tactical maneuver, Blair happily agreed. Charmed by the princess's interest, Charlotte escorted her future sister-in-law to the carriage, securing an ally before bidding her farewell. Returning to her entourage, Martha fretted instantly, asking if the notorious noblewomen had caused trouble, trusting only in the divine protection of Camilla. But Charlotte merely recited an ancient proverb, sit by the riverbank long enough, and the bodies of your enemies will float by. However, instead of the sweet taste of victory, the princess realized she had been outmaneuvered. In one regard, those vipers had stuck her with the entire tea bill. Finally, the sun rose on the day of the debutante ball, bringing with it a delivery that left the trio perplexed. The dress inside was not the one she had selected, sparking fears of a delivery error. Yet, this gown was a masterpiece of higher value and a different hue. No shopkeeper would make such a costly mistake. The mystery unraveled with a sealed letter from Duke Adler himself. His command was precise. Arinius would collect her from the palace at 6 o'clock sharp. Martha swooned at the romance of it all, convinced her mistress was blessed with a fairy tale prince, music, blissfully ignorant that the man's heart was forged of solid ice. Alone at last, Charlotte donned the gift, transforming into a vision of breathtaking elegance. Ever the strategist, she ordered Jonathan to take a carriage to Count Morstan's estate, music, and lie in wait as a failsafe until the gala ended. The moment arrived. Duke Adler appeared, and even the princess felt a jolt of admiration. It was undeniable the man possessed a lethal beauty, justifying his title as the Empire's most coveted bachelor. Arinius approached, offering his hand. As their carriage rolled toward the night's festivities, the Duke broke the silence, fishing for compliments on his tuxedo. Mastering her expression, she praised its classic sophistication. She assured him that no soul at the ball would shine as brightly as he. Music. Absorbing the praise, Arinius smirked, asking if she had fallen for him all over again, his arrogance knowing no bounds. Forcing a smile, Charlotte replied, "Your charm is infinite," while internally questioning if her fiancé had always been this insufferably narcissistic. The gala was already alive with whispers, the air thick with anticipation for Princess Charlotte and Duke Adler. And then, the doors opened. The power couple stepped into the light, capturing every gaze in the room. Stepping into the lion's den of high society, the protagonist feels completely out of her depth, silently praying that Arinius will be her shield in this unfamiliar world. But they have barely crossed the threshold when Duke Adler is intercepted by an acquaintance. Shock, written plainly on the man's face at seeing the Duke actually attend a social event. Lord Bridget turns his gaze to the princess next, with a mocking laugh. He claims he almost didn't recognize her, noting how drastically different she looks without her usual gaudy attire. The silver hair strikes like a viper, getting straight to the point as he feigns surprise that a dress so modest even exists in her wardrobe. Charlotte doesn't flinch. She coolly replies that she is trying to broaden her horizons, and thanks him for his keen observation skills. But the Lord pushes his luck. With zero tact, he sneers that if he had known she possessed such a gentle side, he might have proposed back when the Emperor was desperate to find her a suitor. The hidden insult strikes home immediately. He is mocking her past, implying she was so unwanted that even he would have been a charity case. Unfazed, the girl fires back, "What a pity. It seems you were simply too slow." A critical hit. His ego shatters. Desperate to regain control, Bridget turns to the Duke, asking if he might borrow Charlotte's fiancé for a moment. Since the Duke is a ghost in high society, the crowd is ravenous for a glimpse of him, desperate to solve the mystery of his presence. Charlotte flashes a dazzling, cute smile and agrees, though underneath the mask, annoyance bubbles like magma. As her fiancé becomes the prize pony for the nobility to gawk at, the princess is left to sit on the sidelines, observing the room like a hawk. These vultures never glanced at him when he was by her side, but now, standing among them, Duke Adler shines like a radiant beacon in the dark. Laughter fills the air, and a realization hits the protagonist. Perhaps the real Charlotte wore those loud, extravagant dresses just to scream for a shred of this attention. The thought lingers. She wonders if she has actually grown fond of the original Charlotte after inhabiting her body for these past few weeks. In a way, being invisible is a blessing right now. She has a mission to complete, but in her haste to investigate, she collides hard with a solid wall of a man. It is the cold-blooded Archduke of the North, Killian. Without a word, he abruptly turns, treating her like an obstacle to be avoided. Killian never cared for the imperial family, and he certainly had no qualms about crushing Charlotte's heart and publicly humiliating her for her past obsession with him. In truth, this man is the root cause of the princess being treated as a laughingstock by the entire empire. That ends today. The protagonist decides to reclaim Charlotte's lost dignity, note to her own honor. Before he can vanish, her voice rings out. She declares, cold as ice, that this is no way to treat a princess of the empire. She reminds him that turning his back on imperial blood isn't just rude, it is a punishment against the crown itself. Killian whirls around, scoffing. Is blackmail your new tactic? But Charlotte holds her ground. She delivers an ultimatum the next time he disrespects her. She won't hesitate to file formal charges of lèse-majesté against him. With that power move delivered, the girl coolly asks for permission to depart. The Archduke's ego takes a massive blow as she walks away. Feigning indifference, Charlotte pauses and asks, "Is there anything else?" She reminds him of reality. She is betrothed to Duke Adler now. She demands he stop feeding his own vanity by thinking she still harbors feelings for him. Charlotte strides away, victorious, leaving the mighty Archduke standing there, feeling utterly small and foolish. She slips away to the room at the end of the corridor on the annex's second floor, hunting for clues. But the room is suspicious. Everything has been scrubbed spotless. Thankfully, Jonathan's notes act as her compass, guiding her straight to the first victim's quarters. Suddenly, her breath hitches, a sneeze escapes, followed by a violent fit of coughing. An allergic reaction, panic sets in. She attempts to flee before her throat closes up, but the door creaks open. A maid enters. The protagonist freezes. If word gets out that the princess is snooping around a murder scene, it will be a disaster. But fate smiles upon her. The maid's eyes show no recognition. She doesn't know who stands before her. Charlotte decides to seize the offensive. She must strike hard and fast, leaving the woman no time to think. She channels her inner villainess, snapping imperiously. Do you have no idea who I am? Slipping perfectly into the role of the haughty princess, she demands to know if incompetence is a requirement for working at House Morstan. The red-haired maid trembles and bows. The princess keeps up the pressure, railing about the filth that has covered her noble skin in hives the moment she stepped inside. The maid apologizes profusely but dares to offer a correction. She explains the reaction isn't from dust, it's peaches. The previous occupant was obsessed with fruit experiments. The room was coated in peach fuzz. Even the cleaning staff broke out in rashes just trying to scrub the place. The gears turn in Charlotte's mind. Peaches. What could a fruit allergy possibly have to do with a serial murder? For now, it is just another piece of the puzzle regarding the victim's life. With the grace of a true royal, the princess decides to maintain her performance, letting their insolence slide for this moment, at least. Relieved that her imperial identity remains a secret, our protagonist slips away from the scene. But as she navigates the corridor, the silence is shattered by heated voices drifting nearby room. The argument is fierce, centering on a fortune lost to Lord Ian, the scoundrel who fled with their gold. It is the same group of vipers from the confectionery shop. Now, they are turning their venom on poor, sweet Lady Blair, calling her a traitorous woman. Initially, Charlotte intends to walk away. This petty drama is not her bird bear. However, the voices rise in pitch. One girl screeches that they will not let Blair escape after abandoning her friends to save her own skin. That crosses the line. The princess throws the door open, finding the three bullies cornering her helpless in-law. What is the meaning of this? She demands. The only answer she gets is the music of Blair's tear-filled, pleading gaze. One of the bullies sneers, claiming this is private business, completely oblivious to the dangerous woman she is addressing. But Charlotte refuses to back down. She declares that since Blair is her sister-in-law, this is very much her business. This provokes the lady to lash out at the younger Adler with a stinging insult. Just because you are desperate does not mean you should cling to a rotten rope. But not all princesses are fragile flowers, Charlotte fires back, telling them they lost their money simply because they were too foolish to spot an obvious scam. And then, the finishing blow. At least they have a sturdy rope to hold on to. Her sharp tongue offends the women, who gasp at such behavior from a supposed princess. Charlotte does not care for their outrage. They have gone too far, taking their anger out on an innocent victim irritated. One lady insists they are in the right. She claims Blair seemed promised to invest in their venture, only to back out at the halfway mark like a coward. Tired of this nonsense, the Adler girl reminds them cold-heartedly that she had warned them to be cautious because they smelled of rot from the beginning. Even so, the bully continues her provocation, insinuating that Blair learned such disloyalty from a certain someone who is notorious for being unfaithful to men. The air in the room drops to freezing point. The princess asks calmly, "Are you sure you do not want to take that back?" She then coldly asks if she wishes to be accused of lèse-majesté, but the woman feigns ignorance, claiming she never named anyone specifically. She even laughs in the princess's face, arrogant in her belief that she can never be punished for mere dishonesty toward a noble. A dark glint enters Charlotte's eyes. She remembers that the law is not the only way to punish a sinner. The princess begins to walk forward, her silence unnerving the woman, who demands to know what she is doing. Without a word, the protagonist grabs a heavy wine bottle by the neck. With a look that could kill, she whispers, "Don't you know that violence is faster than the law?" The three bullies freeze, absolutely terrified, realizing the princess might actually be a complete psychopath. They scatter like rats, terrified of being struck. Now alone, Charlotte reveals to Blair that she never intended to swing the bottle. It was just a bluff. Blair weeps with gratitude, thanking her for the rescue. It turns out the business was indeed a fraud, just as Charlotte predicted. Lord Ian had planned it all to cover his massive gambling debts. Charlotte gently asks her to keep this incident a secret, when suddenly her grip fails and the bottle's in her hand. The crash startles the blonde girl. Charlotte quickly explains that her arm simply lost strength for a few seconds, a sign of her frailty. But timing is a cruel mistress. At that exact moment, Duke Adler bursts into the chest heaving from running. He demands to know what is happening. His eyes lock onto the glass, and he asks the princess if she is responsible. Charlotte admits she broke it. The Duke immediately demands to know what she was trying to do to his sister. Blair tries to speak up, but the Duke cuts her off. He saw her friends running away screaming in terror, and then he heard the crash. To him, the evidence is undeniable. He trusts his ears more than her words. Charlotte realizes that since he only heard the sound without seeing the context, the misunderstanding is inevitable. Still, she tries to explain the truth, but Adler is ruthless, asking if she's attempting to weave yet another lie. After all, she admitted to breaking the bottle, he adds with venom. How can you stand there and lie when the wreckage in this room speaks for itself? The young Duke demands she stop her deceit. He admits he thought she had changed, but now he believes she was only hiding her true, wicked nature for a short time. Charlotte looks into his eyes and realizes the heartbreaking truth. He will not believe her, no matter what she says. He never intended to trust her from the very beginning. Resigned to her fate, she turns and leaves, even though she is the victim of this cruel misunderstanding. It is a waste of breath to speak to a man who has already decided she is the villain. Charlotte steps outside, barely holding back her tears. She did everything to save Blair, yet she realizes the Duke will only ever see her as a monster. The princess desperately clutches the lace of her gown to keep from stumbling, her hands trembling with visible tremors. Her knees are on the verge of total collapse, and in her shattered state, she fails to even notice Jonathan standing right beside her. The knight gently asks how the dance went, but Charlotte, feeling her strength fade, whispers that she never stepped onto the floor. He offers a dry comfort, assuring her she missed nothing but a room full of dizzying, pointless spinning. Seeing that she is near her breaking point and desperate to avoid returning to Duke Adler, her bodyguard suggests she wait while he retrieves the carriage. However, the darkness side is suffocating, and the terrified princess refuses to be left alone, insisting on accompanying him. Jonathan seizes the moment to lighten the mood, teasing that she might beg him to save her from a mere garden rabbit, though his amusement only sparks a flicker of irritation in her. Opening his arms wide, Sir Watson offers to carry her himself if her legs can no longer support her weight. Caught off guard, Charlotte swallows her pride and accepts, desperate to escape and rest. As he lifts her, she timidly asks if she is a bird. Jonathan shakes his head, remarking that it is quite the opposite. He had assumed only her arms were fragile. In reality, she is light as a feather, seemingly without a single healthy ounce on her frame. Suddenly sensing a piercing gaze, Charlotte turns her head. Duke Adler stands there in the shadows, boring into her with that same intense, unreadable stare as always. But Charlotte tears her eyes away as her bodyguard speaks, honestly confessing that the boutique dress suited her better, finally drawing a faint smile from her lips. As the sun rises on the next day, Martha inquires if Her Highness plans to write to her fiancé, but the princess coldly refuses, a behavior that the dark-haired maid finds deeply unsettling since writing to him was once her daily ritual. Burning with curiosity, she asks if a love quarrel occurred at the ball. Their conversation is shattered when Sir Watson bursts into the room, sending a wave of fright through the music maid. With a voice void of emotion, Charlotte declares she needs no protection today, but the knight cuts her off with 3 chilling words, "It is the 5th." The statement leaves her completely bewildered, unable to grasp the horror behind his meaning. The grim truth is that the 5th victim of the serial killer was discovered this morning, and shockingly, it is someone the princess knows. The victim is none other than Lord Bridget, commander of the Curtain Army. This connects back to the prestigious Adler family and its primary heir, Arinius Von Adler, Reinius for short, blessed with superior genetics. The boy blossomed into a man who commanded attention wherever he walked. Praise followed him like a shadow, especially during his glorious days at the Imperial Military Academy. Yet, Reinius's picture-perfect life began a slow, agonizing descent into darkness, starting when he was flooded with marriage proposals from young noblewomen. The blonde heir coldly ordered every proposal to be cast into the fire, a reaction that immediately put his mother on high alert. A young man keeping the Duchess company pays his respects and quietly excuses himself, music, now that her son has returned. The Duchess voices her deep anxiety regarding his marriage, asking gently if there is any lady who has captured his heart. But his focus is singular. He only cares for her recovery, insisting that romance is a triviality that can wait. With a heartbreaking gaze, his mother confesses her dying wish to see him wed before her time runs out. Renius finally cracks, begging her not to speak of death, but fate is cruel. Neither her wish nor his hope music would come true. And just as doubt began to creep in about how they would survive without her, their father introduced a new woman to replace her. It was a woman he had met while serving as commander. Renius realizes with horror that his father's affair began while his mother was still fighting for her life. Between his mother's music death, his father's betrayal, and the arrival of a stepmother, Renius's heart froze over, turning hard as stone. Years later, after his father passed, he buried the identity of Renius and fully assumed the mantle of Duke Adler, plunging his world into an abyss of darkness. Then came the day the Emperor summoned him for a frank conversation, slyly asking if the mining rights were expiring this year, using it as leverage to suggest the Duke become engaged to the Imperial youngest daughter. Bound by duty and having no valid objection, and remembering she was known as the delinquent princess, Irenaeus gave his cold acceptance. Though he was far from joyous about the union, defying his majesty was not an option. This brings us to their first meeting, where Duke Adler ruthlessly clarified that this was nothing more than a transactional arrangement. He declared they should not see each other until the ceremony, insisting there was no reason for interaction before the wedding day. The harsh reality is that Duke Adler is marrying her for one reason alone, to secure the mining rights. However, he never anticipated the princess would boldly confess her fee and demand a date, unsettling his calculated world. The notorious delinquent actually desired romance, yet if not for the contract, he would never have entertained this charade. And yet, the more time forced them together, the deeper the princess seemed to fall under his spell. Like the moment Charlotte beamed with joy upon learning she was his first love, leading Irenaeus to ask what she possibly saw in him, and her answer was, to say the least, shocking. After absorbing ever the princess's adoration, Duke Arinius came to a logical conclusion. If her affection ran this deep, surely it was only proper to reciprocate. Inspecting his reflection in the mirror, he coolly questioned his secretary. "Did you acquire the item I requested?" The aide confirmed the mission was a success. He had secured VIP seats to the era's most acclaimed opera, popular among the youth, having paid triple the original value without hesitation. But when the destined hour arrived, Charlotte shattered his expectations. With zero hesitation, she declared, "I'd rather sit right beside you and have a friendly chat than watch some expensive show. Just looking at your handsome face makes me happy enough." The problem? The Duke was fighting a losing battle to hide his own blush. He couldn't let her see how flustered she made him. Moments later, the princess drifted into dreamland. He had spent a fortune on premium tickets, hoping to impress her with the arts. But in the end, fate laughed at his plans. There sat the feared Duke, with her head resting heavily on his shoulder. She remained the same unsophisticated, classless woman she had always been. Screamed, "As soon as the music ends, I'm shoving her head away." Yet, 5 arias passed, and he hadn't moved an inch. Desperately searching for an excuse, the Duke told himself, she is leaning on her fiancé, after all, not some random stranger. He recalled her earlier confession. Perhaps her exhaustion came from losing sleep while thinking of him. Regardless, he devised a new strategy to spare them from this awkwardness in the future. He decided he would announce the date in advance next time, just to ensure the princess got proper rest beforehand. The days leading up to the debutante ball became a living torture for Duke Adler. Frustration boiled over as he slammed his hand on the desk. He couldn't focus. That playful wink she gave him haunted his thoughts, becoming cuter every time he replayed it. Irenaeus could recall every syllable of her praise. Hair like the spring sun, eyes like a crystal clear lake. Without realizing it, he was becoming addicted to the girl's sweet compliments. Secretly, the Duke even hoarded every letter she sent, begging to see him. The feeling of euphoria was intoxicating, and her messages were becoming dangerously direct lately. His secretary interrupted his brooding. "Will you accept the invitation to Lady Morin's grand ball?" Immediately scoffed. He despised such frivolous social gatherings. However, a thought crossed his mind. Charlotte might want him there. To his aide's utter shock, the Duke accepted, ordering a clear slot in his schedule immediately. Before the secretary could retreat, Arinius stopped him with a burning question. What does it mean when a woman demands a date in a private place? He quickly added the classic defense. It is not for me, but for a friend. The secretary blinked. There was only one logical answer. She wanted an intimate moment alone. Then came the second shocker. And what does it mean when a woman says her heart warms whenever she thinks of you? The poor aide stood there, bewildered. His mind raced with the scandalous possibilities of what that could imply. For a man who had never courted anyone, the Duke's friend was moving incredibly fast. He warned that the Duke's friend better prepare his heart. Another day passed, and as per his new ritual, the Duke devoured his fiancée's letters. Intrigued by her bold words, he swore to uncover exactly what the girl wanted from him. But if her intentions were impure, he would cut them off at the root. Naturally, he consulted his trusty manual, A Noble's Guide to Love and Romance. As expected, Charlotte had a request. She wanted him as her partner for the debutante ball, but only if he wasn't busy. Hearing it aloud still sent a jolt of shock through his system. The young Duke frowned, asking, "Didn't you say you were in love with me?" Charlotte clarified her stance. She simply didn't want the man she loved to suffer through an uncomfortable event just for her sake. The Duke realized the truth. The princess was prepared to walk into that ballroom alone because she knew how much he hated crowds. Yet, her eyes sparkled like stars when she admitted she still planned to go. She reasoned with him perfectly. If you don't appear beside your fiancé, it will destroy your reputation in high society. Defeated by her logic, the Duke made a silent vow. From now on, he would issue the invitations first to avoid this unnecessary drama. Then, the princess dropped the bomb. "Would you mind if I showed a little cleavage that day?" The Duke nearly collapsed on the spot. The very next day, Duke Adler issued a rare command. Buy a dress, the finest one. The confused aide asked if it was for Lady Charlotte. Arinius confirmed it with a huff. "She is my fiancée, is she not? It is perfectly acceptable to bestow such gifts." She had confessed to lacking the budget for a new gown. But true to his nature, he couldn't just say he cared. "The deadline for the mining rights is approaching," he insisted. "This is merely a display of loyalty to Imperial Palace." Although the connection remains unclear to most, his loyal retainer prepares to execute the order for the dress, ensuring it is delivered with haste. But Duke Adler halts the process. He demands absolute perfection and insists on approving the design himself. Immediately, he dismisses the first sketch. 2 more designs are aside until nothing remains. Unwilling to settle for mediocrity, the Duke takes matters into his own hands and steps out into the city. Suddenly, his gaze locks onto a treasure, a breathtaking lilac gown, adorned with exquisite details, shining like a jewel in the shop window. A rare, gentle smile graces his lips as Arinius marches toward the boutique. However, his mood sours the moment he learns the dress is already reserved for another. Dismissing the shopkeeper's words, he coldly declares that the dress belongs to him now. The saleswoman, trembling before the Duke's imposing aura, tries to tread carefully. She praises his refined taste but nervously explains that Lady Whittaker has already claimed it, or is desperately attempting to do so. The blonde noble does not care for such trifles. He insists on the purchase, his voice dropping an octave as he asks, "Have you forgotten whose presence you swore?" His tone sends a shiver down even his most loyal subordinate's spine. He is not just a duke, he is the absolute ruler of this very building. Duke Adler throws down an offer of 3 times the dress's value, more than enough to silence any complaints, and showers the counter with gold coins. He had planned to present this gift to the princess at the morning banquet, a romantic gesture to win her heart. But fate was cruel. An assassination attempt involving poison forced the palace into lockdown, separating the Duke from his fiancée for what felt like an eternity. To everyone's shock, it was Charlotte who played the decisive role in saving the Emperor's life. Yet, what stirred Arinius' heart the most was that amidst the chaos, the very first person the princess sought out in the crowd was him. A deep satisfaction settled in his soul. Finally, the long-awaited night of the debutante ball arrives. He felt a sense of relief knowing he had chosen a modest dress, one that would hide her figure from prying eyes. However, Charlotte still captures the gaze of every man in the hall. Renius begins to regret his choice, wondering if he should have picked something far less enchanting. The arrival of Lord Bridget only fuels his irritation. This man has harbored a twisted jealousy toward Renius since their academy days. When Bridget pretends to be a friend, it sends a wave of disgust through the Duke. Bridget displays zero tact, reminiscing about Charlotte's gentle nature and boldly claiming that had he known, he would have proposed to her himself. Every word from his mouth tests the Duke's patience, but thankfully, Bridget changes the subject and asks to speak with Renius in private. Charlotte agrees to let them talk, unaware that her fiancé desperately wished she had stopped him. Does she not feel the same possessiveness he does? If the princess had shown even a hint of displeasure, he would have used it as an excuse to stay by her side. The moment they step toward the other nobles, Bridget sneers, claiming he rescued Renius from the worst woman in the empire. The crowd is stunned by his presence, whispering that the princess must have caused a scene just to drag him here. A poisonous rumor begins to circulate that the dress Charlotte is wearing was stolen from Lady Whittaker. The alleged victim claims she was so distraught over losing the dress she worked so hard to reserve that she could not sleep a wink. According to the gossip, the princess stormed the boutique and tyrannically demanded the gown. Lady Whittaker, powerless, could not refuse. She had no choice but to surrender it. The air fills with malicious whispers directed at Charlotte. Hearing the slander, Duke Adler steps forward, his expression unreadable, demanding the full story. Whittaker claims the incident happened right in front of her at the shop. She insists that if the Duke had seen the princess's horrible behavior, he would be appalled. But the story reeks of falsehood. Renius presses her with a sharp question, yet she doubles down, swearing on her honor that she speaks the truth. That is, until her eyes bulge in terror as the Duke reveals the one flaw in her script: he was the buyer. With a gaze cold enough to freeze hell, the Duke declares, "I purchased this dress myself, and regarding your story, my shameless lady, if my memory serves, you were nowhere to be found." Lady Whittaker begins to stammer, desperately trying to patch the holes in her lie, claiming she heard it from the owner. But the trap has already snapped shut. The owner never knew the recipient of the dress, as the Duke bought it anonymously before gifting it. It is clear she accepted the cancellation fee without complaint. Yet, seeing Charlotte shine at the ball in that dress, jealousy drove her to invent this absurd fiction. Lady Whittaker refuses to let it go. She tries to paint Charlotte as the villain who snatched her prize, the so-called victim, but she underestimated Renius. He reveals that not only did the boutique pay a penalty equal to the dress's cost, but they also gave her a new gown for free. He silences the room with a final, crushing blow. If she intends to lie, she should at least do it competently. He will not tolerate a single false word spoken against his fiancée. The murmurs of the crowd grew toxic, a suffocating fog of gossip. Discomfort rippled through the group. Although that woman had lost her dress, she weaponized the moment, spinning a malicious lie to pour more fuel onto the fire of Charlotte's ruined reputation. Attempting to suppress the chaos, Lord Bridget stepped in with a snake-like smile. He claimed the girl was likely mistaken, casually reminding everyone that the princess is notorious not only for her terrible taste, but for being a pathological liar. Duke Adler's patience snapped. Already despising this man, he did not hold back, pointing out the rich irony of such words coming from a man knee-deep in Cortina's filthiest corruption. The Lord stammered a weak defense, claiming he was merely fulfilling his duty as a commander. But fate intervened. A breathless young lady burst into the circle, announcing the arrival of the legendary Archduke Kilian. The name alone acted like a riptide, sweeping the crowd away from the conflict and dragging even the sobbing Lady Whittaker into his orbit. Duke Adler, however, did not follow the herd. His gaze cut toward a specific corner, the very spot where he had left the princess. It was empty. A dark thought took root in his mind. Had she, too, abandoned him to chase after the star of the night? One of the nobles sneered at the Archduke's charm with women, suggesting they leave the ladies to their swooning and make this a moment for the men. Another voice chimed in, mocking Kilian for being surprisingly naive. It was Bridget again, pouring poison into the conversation. He remarked that with so many women clinging to him, Kilian ought to enjoy himself. Yet the man pushes them away, claiming to never touch a single one. But then, he lowered his voice, planting the insidious idea that perhaps Killian simply indulges his desires without leaving any witnesses. Music. A sharp crack silenced the room upon hearing such filth. Duke Adler gripped his wineglass with such fury that it exploded in his hand. He declared that the man had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The room froze in shock. Yet Bridget had the audacity to ask if Renius was defending the princess simply because of their engagement. He sneered, insinuating that Renius might feel the need to play the hero, but he was certain that the lying girl was currently throwing herself at Archduke Killian. Sick, just as she always had in the past. Renius did not shout. He calmly wiped the wine from his hand with a handkerchief and declared, with deadly coldness, that Bridget would answer for those words. The wine cloth was thrown at the scoundrel's feet, a challenge issued. Duke Adler turned on his heel without another word, leaving the man trembling in his wake. As he stormed down the corridor, music, Renius felt the weight of exhaustion crashing down on him. If his partner were anyone but the princess, he would never have set foot in this viper's nest. Suddenly, he froze. Fate was cruel, for there stood his fiancé, talking to the one person on earth he prayed she would avoid. Through his jealous eyes, Charlotte wore that same foolish, love-struck expression she always had. Killian seemed indifferent, yet he did not push her away. For Renius, witnessing that ambiguous moment was enough to shatter his composure. Duke Adler could not bear to watch the ending. He turned away, heading for a secluded balcony to be alone with his turmoil, letting his mind spiral into darkness. He recalled Charlotte begging him not to attend the ball because Killian would be there. Was it a warning or a strategy? She had sworn she left her past behind, that she only held space in her heart for him. But Bridget's mocking voice echoed in his head. Charlotte lies about everything. The pieces of a twisted puzzle began to click into place. Suddenly, shrill screams tore through the air. Girls were running in terror, shouting that the princess was a complete psychopath. Renius's blood ran cold. He recognized those girls. They were his sister's friends. Came the crash of shattering glass from the darkness where the girls had fled. Duke Adler bolted into the room. A nightmare awaited him. He found Charlotte standing over Blair, whose eyes were swimming with tears. Between them lay a broken wine bottle. His sister was trembling in fear. Music. His mind went blank, unable to process the scene. Renius stood in silence for a heartbeat before he snapped. Shielding his sister, he unleashed a torrent of venom at Charlotte, declaring that she could not hide her true, twisted nature forever. The princess, music, defeated, simply lowered her head. She offered no defense, no excuses. After enduring his insults, she turned and walked away into the shadows, leaving even the Archduke confused. But Blair would not let this injustice stand. "Have you lost your mind?" the girl screamed at her brother. He sharply told her to watch her tone in public, but she was past caring. "Charlotte, save me," she cried. "I was suffering at the hands of those girls. The bottle fell by accident. How could you condemn her without listening to a single word?" The Duke felt the world crumble beneath his feet. All he could do was stammer, asking why this truth was only being revealed now. Sobbing uncontrollably, the girl delivered the final blow. "I would have explained if you hadn't refused to listen. You just screamed whatever you wanted and drove her away." Now, she didn't know how she could ever face the princess again. The realization hit Duke Adler like a physical strike. He turned and sprinted out to fix the catastrophic mess he had made. He burst into the night air, scanning desperately, until he spotted her, a solitary figure still standing at the very top of the staircase. Renius steels his resolve to explain everything and apologize for the misunderstanding. But fate is cruel, and at that exact moment, another man sweeps his fiancée into his arms. A surge of dark jealousy flares in his chest. Charlotte spots him amidst the crowd, their eyes locking for a heartbeat, but she coldly turns away, allowing herself to be carried off into the distance. Days of agonizing silence follow. Charlotte, who usually sends daily correspondence, has gone completely mute. It has been days since a single letter graced his desk. He feels like the absolute greatest fool to ever walk the earth. That very day, Blair had unleashed her fury on her brother. She screamed that the princess must be sick of him, and if she were Charlotte, she would never look at his face again. For Renius, the despair sets in. Music. After all, under normal circumstances, they wouldn't meet again until the wedding day itself. He desperately tries to convince himself that her falling out of love changes. He tells himself it doesn't matter anymore. Suddenly, his secretary bursts into the office in a state of sheer panic. Renius demands to know what emergency warrants entering without a knock. The Duke's eyes light up with hope when he hears a letter from the princess has arrived. Music. Feigning indifference, he asks if all this chaos is just over a piece of paper. But the news shatters his composure. The letter states that Princess Charlotte is currently sitting in a police holding cell. Let's rewind a few hours before Renius rushed out in a blind panic. The princess was deep in discussion regarding the grisly crime from that morning. According to the intel Jonathan gathered, the kill method mirrors the previous 4 victims perfectly. The police wasted no time connecting the dots. This is the work of the serial killer. Sir Watson confirms the chilling file. The perpetrator is a massive man, standing at least 180 centimeters tall. It makes terrifying sense. Only a monster of that size could overpower and strangle Commander Bridget, a woman trained in rigorous military combat. This realization hardened Charlotte's resolve. She cannot abandon the investigation simply because her heart is broken. The crime scene is in Jonathan's old neighborhood, but make no mistake, this is no place for nobility. It is Norwood Street, a slum teeming with beggars and criminals, the rotting underbelly of the glamorous imperial capital. The only lead they have is the victim's body, currently lying in the precinct's morgue. The protagonist poses a dangerous question. Would it look suspicious for a princess to demand to see a corpse? Jonathan's eyes go wide as he realizes she intends to go there herself. The thought has indeed taken root in Charlotte's mind. Music. That body is the key, the most crucial piece of evidence in this homicide puzzle. Jonathan counters immediately, warning that it would be incredibly suspicious. He clearly cannot fathom why she's risking everything to solve these cases. But she shuts him down cold. She reminds him that he was hired to help without question, so he better stop trying to understand her motives. Charlotte then asks if the station has holding cells. A wicked, cunning smile spreads across her face as a plan forms. She slips into Martha's humble garments, and the fit is perfect. It goes without saying that the dark-haired maid has absolutely no clue her wardrobe has been raided. The protagonist asks if she still resembles the high-born Charlotte. Jonathan assures her that no one looks for a princess in the slums. Once on site, she orders Sir Watson to hang back and watch. He is only to intervene once the police have dragged her away. Charlotte uncorks a bottle of wine and proceeds to down the entire liquid courage straight from the bottle. The alcohol hits her blood instantly. She begins causing a chaotic scene, running wild in the streets. It takes a mere 30 minutes for the trap to spring. As the officer slaps the cuffs on her, he sighs. You really should rethink your life choices, young lady. Broad daylight, and you're already wasted. Police. It's baffled how someone so slender can cause such a massive ruckus. Under imperial law, any drunkard causing emotional or physical distress is thrown straight into the drunk tank. Charlotte exploited this loophole perfectly because it is a minor offense. She can easily secure her freedom by paying a pitiful bail and having a guarantor confirm her identity. Best of all, the Emperor will never catch wind of it. She starts screaming at the officer, demanding to know why she's arrested, and threatening that they will regret this. The man starts lecturing her, scolding her for getting drunk and wild in a dangerous neighborhood where a murder happened just this morning. Music. Keeping up the act, the princess slurs that he's a liar trying to scare her. The officer snaps back that the victim's cold body is lying right next door. He just handed her the exact intel she needed. Moments later, the princess demands to use the bathroom, but the officer is losing his patience. She has to escalate, shamelessly asking if he plans to clean up the mess if she wets herself right there. But Charlotte's master plan hits a wall when the man steadfastly refuses to let her out of the cell. The princess demands his superior. She drops the ultimate power move. Do you know who I am? I dined with your boss just yesterday. We went to a sauna. We were just having tea, she babbles, feigning total intoxication. Charlotte escalates the drama, screaming that her bladder is about to burst and demanding to know if he plans to clean the mess, forcing the flustered guard to crumble. It is child's play for a woman who once navigated the criminal underworld. Fate smiles upon her. The morgue is dangerously close to the bathroom, perfectly aligning with her scheme. Desperate to return to the high-profile investigation, the officer waves her off. He commands her to handle her business and vanish, warning her to stay put until her guardian arrives to collect her. No one guards a delicate, drunken noblewoman too closely, not when the station is in chaos over the capital's major murder case. Music. The moment she is alone, the facade drops. Charlotte slips out of the bathroom and cracks the morgue door open, peering into the abyss. Silence greets her. She slips into the room, her gaze locking onto the target instantly. The protagonist approaches the cold steel table and lifts the shroud. Her eyes widen as the truth reveals itself. The grisly mark of death is etched into his neck, showing the world exactly how Lord Bridget met his end. Her past life's instincts roar to life. She scans the corpse like a hawk, noting the pristine face and the complete absence of defensive wounds. Aside from the ghastly pallor of death, he looks exactly as he did in life. It is impossible. A battle-hardened military commander would never go down without a fight unless he couldn't fight back. And there it is, faint red blotches marring his skin, the telltale sign of a chemical overdose. The realization hits like a hammer. Bridget was poisoned first, then strangled to stage the scene. Whether forensic science in this world is primitive or the killer is a genius, the police have been completely played. Charlotte retreats to the corridor, her mind racing. Why go to such lengths to falsify the cause of death? Deep in thought, she collides with an officer who eyes her unsteady stance, asking if the alcohol still has its hold on her. Her sharp eyes lock onto the evidence box in his hands. He dismisses her, explaining that they are buried under the weight of a capital crime and have no time to babysit a hungover girl. He orders her to sit still and sober up. But a new crisis emerges. Jonathan cannot be the one to bail her out. It baffles her. Even a commoner should suffice as a guarantor for a petty drunkenness charge. But Sir Watson drops a hard truth. He is not just a commoner, but a criminal on parole, thanks to her own intervention. Panic sets in. She doesn't know who to call. If word reaches the Imperial Palace that the princess is in a drunk tank, the budget increase she fought tooth and nail for will be slashed to zero. Despair looms until a spark of memory ignites. There is one person outside the palace's grip who would dare to come for her. With no other options, she begs Jonathan to send a message in her name. Before the Duke arrives, chest heaving, drenched in sweat from a frantic sprint to reach his fiancé. Rainius demands an explanation, yet a charming smile breaks through as he teases that she looks ravishing even while reeking of sweat and spirits. He presses again, asking why she is here. The princess gestures casually to the iron bars, stating the obvious: she is sitting in a cell. However, the Duke is not amused. He asks if she was truly arrested for public intoxication and if she thinks that disguise on her head is fooling anyone. Charlotte turns up the charm to maximum. Sometimes a girl just wants to let loose, she purrs, before cutting to the chase. Since you are here, get me out. The officers return, jaws dropping as they realize his grace, the Duke, is personally collecting the drunkard. As the men converse, Charlotte watches in cold silence. The irony is suffocating. They are standing right in front of the murderer they are hunting. It is a chaotic farce, a police station buzzing with an investigation, while the prime suspect, her fiancé, calmly verifies her identity to secure her release. A normal man would be terrified entering the heart of the investigation into his own crime, but Charlotte knows better. This level of pressure is nothing to a serial killer. Rainius smooths everything over with terrifying ease, and they walk out together, a thick, awkward silence hanging between them. Charlotte breaks the tension, murmuring her thanks. She had no one else to turn to. Despite the darkness surrounding him, he is still her fiancé. Duke Adler surprises her. Instead of the cold lecture she expected about her inability to hide her true nature, he looks at her with concern. Are you hurt? Stunned, Charlotte simply replies that she is fine, and a visible wave of relief washes over him. Guilt pricks at her. She moves to say goodbye, but Rainius stops her. He cleared his entire schedule for her, and he intends to stay. With zero ceremony, the Duke demands a date immediately. It catches his fiancée completely off guard, especially since he literally just liberated her from a prison cell. This is the etiquette of high nobility. Finally isolated from prying eyes, the atmosphere turns heavy with unsaid words. Rainius seizes the chance, his eyes piercing as he demands that a royal princess would descend to such a place. Charlotte spins a tale of a famous pub on Norwood Street, but she knows, if a princess is caught indulging in such vice, it spells absolute disaster. The protagonist must sell the lie. Channeling the spirit of a rebellious royal, she claims the crown's weight is suffocating, leading to moments of crushing hurt and frustration. She explains her desire to drown her sorrows, seeking the sweet oblivion of alcohol to numb the pain for just a moment. She turns the table, asking if his heart ever grows this heavy. But Ad's brutally honest. He has never surrendered control to liquor, leaving a chasm of understanding between them. It forces her to apologize for the awkwardness she created. In the depths of her mind, panic rises. She needs to shift the conversation before her flimsy excuse crumbles into dust. But Renius drops another bombshell. He asks if he was the source of the pain that drove her to the bottle. Regret shadows his features as he brings up his cold behavior at Lady Morstan's debutante ball. Sadness washes over him. He confesses his grave error, apologizing for kindness and the improper way he treated her that night. Though the hour is late, he offers gratitude for saving Blair. The words struggle to leave the young Duke's throat. He averts his gaze, shame burning his cheeks. Charlotte counters simply, Blair is his sister. Since their fates are bound by marriage, protecting family is merely instinct. The princess is baffled by this sudden vulnerability. Renius had always sensed a disturbing aura around Charlotte. Yet, when faced with this unpolished version of her, the unease vanishes. Earlier that day, fate played a cruel joke. Every carriage had been commandeered by a stepmother and sister, or it would take 30 agonizing minutes. Impossible. He could not wait that long. He had to reach the shameless woman demanding rescue from a dungeon immediately. The Duke sprinted until his lungs burned, finally finding the delinquent princess on a filthy cell floor, stripped of glamour, face bare and raw. And yet, why did this ridiculous woman suddenly look adorable to him? He had no doubt that the lack of oxygen from his desperate run was clouding his judgment. But the true terror gripping his heart was the accusation itself, his fiancé, charged with public drunkenness. He recalls the conversation with his secretary. Renius noted the sudden silence. Well, her daily letters had ceased. Did this silence signal the death of their engagement, even without knowing the Duke's sins? The aide mentioned a rumor when a lover prepares to sever ties. They often change their hair or drown themselves in wine. His imagination ran wild. Charlotte had fallen into that state because he had like an absolute fool at the ball. Then she confessed it herself, leaving him thunderstruck. It was the first time he had ever bowed his head in apology. And Charlotte, she offered forgiveness with the grace of a saint. Adler felt a mountain of guilt dissolve into nothingness. A spark of excitement ignites in his chest. Could she be the one, the soul who truly understands him? He decides to take a leap of faith, to share a burden that has haunted him in silence, something he has never told a living soul. Renius admits his hesitation about this venue. The last time he visited, a shadow fell over this place. The protagonist blinks in surprise. Is the young nobleman about to confess to a dark crime? At her urging, he unveils the past from 2 months prior. The head chef, in a fit of arrogance, ignored his order. He served the steak medium, insisting the blood enhanced the flavor. The man had crossed the line, even if it was simply a culinary choice. But Adler harbors a devastating secret. When the metallic scent of crimson fluid, a primal panic takes over. Though it was merely juice from the meat, the smell was suffocating. He nearly lost all control in front of Blair and his stepmother that day. Charlotte is floored. The man known as a ruthless serial killer, the top graduate of the military academy, terrified of a little blood, he begs her not to look at him with such pity. The truth is gruesome. As his mother lay dying, retching up her own lifeblood, he was right there beside her. Since that nightmare, whenever that scent fills the air, his lungs seize up as the memories crash over him like a tidal wave. The puzzle pieces together. Charlotte finally grasps why a warrior of his caliber refused to join the Imperial Army after graduation, and the young Duke confirms it with a solemn nod. He can never serve on a battlefield stained with red. Renius finally lowers his icy walls, confessing a haunting doubt that plagues his soul. He wonders if his mother would still be breathing today had he stayed by her side instead of leaving for the academy. After all, leaving her in his father's care was akin to leaving a lamb with a wolf. He was never a true guardian to her. Charlotte feels the weight of his sorrow and gently asks if anyone else shares this burden. But she is the sole keeper of his secret. Confused, she asks why he chose her, yet even he cannot find the words. Then, his gaze softens as he whispers, "Perhaps it is because we are destined to become family." Later, Charlotte calls the waiter and deliberately orders her steak well done. Duke Adler immediately protests, insisting she need not make such a sacrifice for his sake. He knows she is only doing it to spare him the sight of blood. He assures her his trauma is not so severe that he cannot bear the sight of red juices on another's plate. But she smiles, claiming she simply craves the texture of well-cooked meat today. He worries that the dry meat will ruin her meal. He believes she could never enjoy such a dish. But to Charlotte, meat is a divine treat no matter how it is prepared. She understands all too well that witnessing a parent's death leaves scars that never truly fade. And even the so-called villain of this novel is not immune to such tragedy. Memories of her own past life crash over her like a tidal wave. She remembers a joyous return from an amusement park, a trip her family had scrimped and saved for, ending in the screech of tires and shattered glass. She alone emerged from the wreckage. The guilt consumed her, a voice constantly whispering that if she hadn't begged for that trip, they would still be alive. The girl recalls those dark days spent drowning in an ocean of self-blame. Charlotte looks at Adler and wonders if he, too, endures such sleepless nights. The princess realizes that this was his fault. Gently placing her hand over the Duke's, she anchors him in the present and tells him to release that heavy burden. After their emotional dinner concludes, night falls over the capital. Charlotte returns to the solitude of the imperial palace. Lying in her opulent bed, a warning flashes in her mind. She knows she must not let her heart grow attached to the very man she is investigating. Yet, despite her resolve, she ended up comforting him. Her thoughts spin in a dizzying vortex, and she questions what is happening to her own heart. But she shakes off the sentimentality. Now is not the time for romance, for she knows the official cause of the victim's death was a lie. The protagonist prepares to compile the evidence from her infiltration at the police station. She has uncovered the chilling truth that Lord Bridget was not strangled, but poisoned. A terrifying pattern emerges. 2 other victims met the exact same grim fate before this one. However, a shadow is working behind the scenes. Someone is deliberately using poison while staging the scene to look like a hanging. Even without examining the other bodies, the inconsistencies scream at her. The knot found at the scene was distinctly different from the signature of the known serial killer. Since all 5 previous victims were bound with an identical knot, this anomaly suggests a copycat or a frame-up. It is highly likely these 3 murders were committed by a different hand. If the true cause of death is poison and not strangulation, the killer's profile changes completely. There is no longer a need for the culprit to be a powerful man with a large build. A sudden realization strikes the princess. She recalls a crucial detail Blair mentioned just a few days ago regarding the first victim. The girl had mentioned that her brother fired a maid, claiming she wasn't taking her duties seriously. Blair had lamented the cruelty of fate. Noting that the poor woman suffered a terrible end shortly after becoming the governess for Lady Morstan, Charlotte connects the dots. That governess, and the chef who dared to cook Duke Adler's steak rare against orders. Both victims share a link to the Duke, and both had incurred his displeasure. The protagonist wonders, could a mere annoyance be motive enough for murder? Despite Renius possessing a cold and distant demeanor, she cannot imagine him taking a life for such petty grievances. But the only reason Charlotte suspected her fiancé in the first place was the original novel's introduction, a story she had only skimmed through in her past life. Now, the foundation of her knowledge begins to crack. She asks herself the dangerous question, what if the novel was wrong? What if he is not the killer? And if it is not him, then who is lurking in the shadows? Another banquet day arrives, bringing with it the dark memories of the last gathering that ended in a bloodbath. But the Emperor is in high spirits, relieved that the crisis was resolved so they can celebrate once more. Thus, the morning banquet commences. Charlotte's senses are sharp as a blade. It does not take long for her to notice Camilla plotting in the corner. The scheme becomes obvious almost immediately. Maris Dost is present, a pawn clearly under the redhead's influence. Soon, the man is called upon to speak, masking his trap as a request for guidance. He chooses his words carefully, mentioning complaints that the Empire's legal system is failing to resolve complex issues. He feigns ignorance, asking to weigh the pros and cons of a specific legal reform. With a sly glint in his eye, he directs the question straight to Charlotte, demanding her public opinion. If their plan was to humiliate the princess, they made a fatal error. They have just handed her a weapon she knows how to wield perfectly. Inspired, she prepares to strike back. Minutes pass as Charlotte dissects the issue with surgical precision. Her brilliant analysis sends waves of murmurs through the stunned crowd. When she finishes, Market Dust is left speechless. He admits he has nothing to add to her flawless logic. The Emperor beams with pride, and the room erupts in praise for his daughter. Charlotte smiles, savoring Camilla's defeat. The villainess tried to trap the protagonist in her own field of expertise, completely unaware that she was challenging a master. The momentum continues as a list of upcoming official imperial events is presented to His Majesty. As the Emperor scans the document, his eyes widen in surprise. The time has already come for the Grand Imperial Confederation banquet. It is an annual spectacle where high officials and the leaders of Asgard's vassal states converge. Theoretically, they gather to weave harmony among the nations and strengthen their ironclad alliances. But in truth, this stage exists for one reason only: for the vassal states to kneel and prove their absolute loyalty to the Emperor. The official announces that due to the recent scandal, the Cortina family has been ruthlessly struck from the guest list. Consumed by arrogance, the Emperor commands that this year's gala must outshine all others in history. Yet, one final decision remains. An aide cautiously asks if Princess Camilla's birthday celebration will grace the Emperor's palace once again. But the Emperor's eyes turn cold. He rejects the idea instantly, banishing the party to the redhead's own private residence. Because this year, the one to receive that supreme honor will be Charlotte. Shocked whispers explode across the court like wildfire. Naturally, this does not sit well with Camilla, whose face twists in silent fury at the sudden rejection. However, the Emperor's word is absolute law. He rises from his throne, refusing to hear a single complaint from his daughter. Charlotte stands frozen in place, her mind racing to process the shift in the wind. Typically, royal children celebrate in their own palaces, but the Emperor selects one favorite child each year for the main palace event. For years, that spotlight belonged to Camilla, marking her as the undisputed heir to the throne. But everything changed on the day of the poisoning. As Prince Felipe noted, if Charlotte hadn't caught the poison in time, Camilla would have taken everything. Though definitive proof remains elusive, the protagonist senses a shift in the air. That incident gave the Emperor a reason to doubt, his paranoia growing toward those lurking in the shadows. Even so, Charlotte never asked for this favor. There is simply no reason for anyone to direct their anger at her. Suddenly, her thoughts are shattered. Renius appears with a bold smile, casually bringing up their date as if he owns the place. As they stroll side by side, the princess admits her surprise that the cold Duke was the one to initiate the conversation. But now, knowing there is a chance he isn't the culprit, she finds herself at a loss for words. It is the young nobleman who cuts through the silence first. Renius remarks on her impressive knowledge of the law, asking with genuine curiosity if she studies legal theory in her spare time. Flustered, the protagonist tries to downplay it. She claims it was just a focus of her studies, startled by his keen observation. Then, Duke Adler drops the bombshell. He invites her to be his partner at the upcoming Imperial Confederation banquet. Charlotte is left breathless. Quickly, Renius assures she genuinely enjoys the event, so she need not worry about his comfort. Charlotte suspects this reassurance stems from the past. She remembers telling him he didn't need to be her partner before. Regardless, she accepts his hand, leaving the young Duke beaming with delight. Seizing the moment, Renius leans in and asks if there is anything else she wishes to tell him. Charlotte denies it, confused by his playful behavior. In truth, she has no clue what has gotten into him. His demeanor has flipped completely. It isn't just today. She starts to wonder if she uttered some forgotten phrase that sparked this change. Suddenly, the princess points to his face. "Duke, there is something on your cheek." When he asks what it is, she deadpans. "It is beauty." The air stands still. No one expected that line. It was a wild guess, as Charlotte wasn't sure if he was actually fishing for a compliment. Panic sets in as she realizes he might see her as an ego-stroking machine. Seriously, how can this vain goofball be a serial killer? Smooth as ever, Duke Adler decides to shift the topic. He mentions hearing that her dress was ruined during Lady Morstan's reception. Charlotte waves it off, claiming it was her own clumsy mistake. But the Duke insists on compensation. Since the tragedy occurred while she helped his sister, he declares her new gown will be his gift for the banquet. The princess hesitates, asking if that is truly necessary. She mentions her palace budget has increased, and she has plenty of her own designs gathered. But the Duke is adamant. With foreign dignitaries watching, he insists his partner must outshine them all. This sparks a small misunderstanding. As the protagonist wonders if he thinks her own dresses are trash, he quickly tries to salvage the situation. He vows to buy her a gown from Emmers, the most exclusive boutique in the Empire. Renius confesses he made a mistake at the last party, and his honor cannot bear the weight of that debt. Charlotte realizes his position. As a state minister, he cannot risk the embarrassment of a partner in tattered rags. However, a reservation at Emmers is nearly impossible to secure, even for the highest VIPs in the land. She agrees to let the Duke handle the reservation, yet she insists on paying the bill herself, a small act of defiance. It is a compromise that leaves the Duke satisfied, interpreting her stubbornness as a simple desire to look perfect for the occasion. Back within the safety of the palace, Martha is practically vibrating with excitement over the prestigious reservation. To the princess, it is merely a trivial detail, but her loyal maid sees it very differently. Martha is determined to flaunt their status, ensuring the world knows the princess belongs at the Imperial Palace's birthday banquet. With a gleam in her eye, she asks if this is the moment. They finally crush the arrogance of Camilla's servants. She eagerly spills the tea, revealing that the red-haired rival failed miserably to secure a spot at the boutique. However, her moment of triumph is cut short by a sudden question from the corner of the room. Jonathan, who had been standing like a statue, innocently asks if nobles truly buy new dresses for every single event. Martha immediately snaps at him, scolding the knight for speaking such rude thoughts in the presence of royalty. Cuts in with a sigh, noting that she has dresses in her closet that have never even seen the light of day. The maid interprets this as typical noble extravagance, unaware the princess is battling memories of a past life. Deep down, the soul inhabiting this body still remembers the sting of poverty, making the luxury feel alien. Exhausted by the masquerade, Charlotte collapses onto the bed, dreading the endless preparations that lie ahead. Martha scolds her for her unladylike posture, but with no other eyes watching, the princess simply does not care. Charlotte's gaze shifts, and landing squarely on Jonathan. Realizing her eyes are upon him, a flush rises to his cheeks, and he quickly excuses himself, promising to return the next day. She watches his retreating figure in silence, her mind drifting back to the heavy conversation they shared earlier. Sir Watson had dug into the history of Marquis Bridget, a man whose last public sighting was at the debutante ball. That was the night the princess met him, an encounter that left a foul taste in everyone's mouth. Jonathan had asked if that tension was linked to the Duke, a question that only added to Charlotte's irritation. Reports whispered of a dark atmosphere that night between the Marquis of Lemuria and the terrifying Duke Adler. Jonathan realized she was in the dark about the details, but the facts remained. Since that clash, the Marquis had vanished. And as they all suspected, crossing the Duke usually meant meeting a grim fate. Once again, a man who offended Duke Adler has disappeared. But Charlotte is puzzled why a high-ranking noble was found in the slums of Norwood. Jonathan theorized he was there for business, and likely meeting with a human trafficking ring. The Marquis had a reputation stealth, a man who rose to power through brutality. As a leader in the Imperial army stationed in Cortina, he was for his cruel tyranny over the locals. Rumors swirled that he was trafficking war orphans, selling innocent lives as slaves within the Empire's borders. It is a sickening trade, trading human souls for gold. Horrified, Charlotte asked if the Empire turned a blind eye, and Sir Watson confirmed the bitter truth. Rage simmered within him as he explained, for without undeniable proof, a noble is untouchable. It seems the cruel laws of the Empire are shackles meant only for the common people. Shifting the focus, Jonathan asked about her visit to the morgue. With a deceptive smile, Charlotte confirmed the task was done. She claimed she only checked the files, adding that the corpse was as gruesome as expected. But she keeps the true findings to herself, choosing to lie even to her loyal bodyguard. For the protagonist had done her own research, and digging into the man who now protects her. She discovered that Jonathan, as a military investigator, and had once tried to expose Marquis Bridget's atrocities in Cortina to Captain Kensington. But justice was denied. The captain in London ordered a cover-up. When Watson refused to be silenced, a gun was leveled at his head. Cornered and threatened, his instincts took over. He subdued his superior, only to face a court-martial where the corrupt Marquis testified against him, sealing his fate. Music. This revelation casts a long shadow, implies Jonathan holds a deep grudge against the dead Marquis, making him a suspect. In this game of shadows, Total trust is a luxury she cannot afford. Her silence is her only shield. With her resolve hardened, the princess heads to the boutique, stepping back into the light of society. The trio arrives at their destination, and Martha is practically vibrating with excitement over their reservation at the prestigious Immerse boutique. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper reveals a startling truth. She has received direct orders from Duke Adler himself to treat Her Highness with the utmost priority. Consequently, the woman is prepared to unveil the absolute finest masterpieces the store has to offer. Charlotte's mind is clouded with worry over the budget, but the brunette insists she cannot surrender now. She urges the princess to buy the dress, even if it means delaying Sir Watson's salary for a month. The princess steps into the fitting room, trying on gown after gown, and each design is more breathtaking than the last. But while the ladies are swept up in the magic of fashion, Jonathan stands there, his enthusiasm completely non-existent. Finally, Charlotte sets her heart on a specific dress, but realizing it is the most expensive piece in the boutique, a wave of regret washes over her for refusing the Duke's offer to pay for it earlier. The moment of truth arrives with the bill, and the princess already feels a pit forming in her stomach, imagining the astronomical sum. She is so terrified that she can only peek at the receipt with one fearful eye. However, shock replaces fear as she discovers the total is less than half of what she paid last time. She immediately questions the shopkeeper, asking if this is some sort of mistake. Even with the merchant confirming the amount, such a ridiculously low price defies all logic. It simply does not add up. The woman insists everything is correct, claiming that even a high-end merchant can manage a low-income business project, though her explanation sounds distinctively rehearsed. With no evidence of foul play, all Charlotte can do is accept the impossible discount. The transaction is finalized with a promise of delivery to the palace. Yet the princess steps out of the boutique with a lingering shadow of suspicion in her heart. Fate, however, is fickle. The moment they step outside, the heavens open up and rain begins to pour. They still have a reservation at the convenience store to attend to. Charlotte prepares to brave the storm as she is, merely asking for a carriage to be summoned. But Jonathan immediately blocks her path, questions if she plans to wander in this downpour, risking a high fever given her delicate condition. He reminds her that her body is far too frail for such recklessness. Sir Watson commands her to wait under shelter while he retrieves an umbrella and a carriage. Charlotte hesitates, feeling a pang of guilt that it is unfair for him to soak in the freezing rain alone. But the young knight stands firm, reminding her of his past as a soldier. A little water is nothing compared to the battlefields he has survived. Without waiting for a rebuttal, Jonathan dashes into the storm, leaving the ladies safely behind. Martha watches him go and praises his character, noting that despite his rough edges, his sincerity is genuine. The princess nods, acknowledging that she chose her personal guard well. However, the brunette soon voices a deeper concern. Jonathan is a man whose inner thoughts remain a mystery. This is precisely why the princess keeps an emotional distance, especially since his contract expires the moment she marries the Duke. Charlotte silently agrees with this assessment. After all, in this cold world, the young man's loyalty is ultimately tied to the coin he receives. To lighten the mood, the two shift the conversation back to the bizarrely low price of the dress. Charlotte's instincts flare up, and she promptly accuses Duke Adler of pulling strings from the shadows. But suddenly, she freezes, startled by a presence behind her. Upon hearing a deep, familiar voice, Charlotte spins around, coming face to face with Renius himself. He smirks and says, "I see the princess talks a lot about me when I'm not around." Flustered at being caught red-handed, Charlotte quickly denies the accusation, pivoting to thank him, admitting that because of his influence, she secured a truly beautiful dress. The Duke seems satisfied with her success and asks if they are stranded by the weather. Charlotte confirms she is merely waiting for her carriage to arrive, but curiosity gets the better of her, and she boldly asks what the great Duke is doing in such a place. Reminding her that he owns nearly everything in the empire, he reveals that this very building belongs to the Duchy of Adler, and he is only here to handle an unexpected matter. He claims he had no idea he would run into the princess by chance, but to Charlotte, this coincidence feels entirely too convenient. To make a reservation at a boutique he owns, only for him to appear at that exact time, suspicion rises like bile in her throat. He might be monitoring her every move. There are too many loose ends. and the Duke remains the prime suspect in her mind. While he feigns concern, she fears he may actually be hunting for an opportunity to eliminate her quietly. Nevertheless, Charlotte maintains her perfect porcelain mask, agreeing with a fake smile that this is nothing more than a whimsical twist of fate. Arinius seems pleased by her compliance. Just then, his secretary appears, informing him that their schedule demands they leave immediately. This marks the first meeting between Charlotte and Alfred, and the man offers Her Highness a respectful, formal greeting. Charlotte's mind races. This man must know the Duke's secrets and locations. She immediately begins plotting how to extract information from him. But catching her intense gaze upon his subordinate, Arinius completely misunderstands the situation, consumed by sudden jealousy. He shoves his secretary aside and barks an order for him to fetch the carriage immediately. Duke Adler then turns his piercing gaze to Charlotte, asking if she has some issue with his secretary, his tone dripping with possessiveness, as if implying she shouldn't be interested in another man. Charlotte naturally denies it, but the Duke's suspicion lingers in the air between them. Adler demands to know the meaning behind her stare, but the princess doubles down, declaring she has eyes only for him. It feels as though the Duke is trying to peer into her very soul, but ultimately, her bold romantic declaration causes the formidable man to blush. And so, the three of them remain huddled in the corner, a silent tableau sheltering from the relentless rain while they wait for destiny and their carriages to arrive. The Duke leans in close, his gaze lingering on his fiancée, before he gently presses his own umbrella into her hands. Citing an urgent appointment, Arinius steps fearlessly into the pouring rain, leaving his secretary to chase after him in sheer desperation, while Martha swoons over the romantic sacrifice. Yet, what catches Charlotte's sharp eyes is something far more unsettling than a simple gesture of kindness. Her focus locks onto the intricate knot securing the umbrella. Meanwhile, in the safety of his carriage, Arinius scolds his subordinate for making a fuss over water. Alfred nervously reminds him of the high-stakes meeting with the Imperial Bank president, questioning his master's sanity. With arrogant confidence, the blonde noble declares that his influence will not crumble simply because his jacket is damp. Arinius shoots the man a glare cold enough to freeze water, asking if his subordinate has forgotten his place. But the young secretary holds his ground, teasingly reminding the Duke that he wasn't the one who changed outfits twice just for a morning visit. He boldly insinuates that the entire trip to the building was merely an excuse to catch a glimpse of the princess. Arinius snaps back, accusing his secretary of developing a terrible habit of inventing meanings where none exist. Shifting the topic, the Duke confirms the boutique arrangement, revealing that he secretly covered the cost, leaving Charlotte to pay only 10%. The staff were under strict orders to convince the princess that the price was standard and to reject every other reservation from the Imperial League. He ensured that no other noble would get their hands on that design, effectively blocking all other sales. This maneuver means he will forfeit an entire year's worth of rent payments from the shop. But to him, the loss is trivial. He achieved his goal of protecting his fiancée's pride while allowing her the satisfaction of paying. Arinius recalls Charlotte's whisper about destiny, and a rare, tender smile softens his stoic features. The Duke basks in the satisfaction that out of the entire Imperial League, only Charlotte will shine in an amorous dress. We return to Cess, who waits patiently for her guard. Jonathan arrives with the unfortunate news that umbrellas are sold out everywhere. The sudden downpour caught everyone off guard, but he barely finishes his report when a detail stops him cold. He notices the umbrella as Martha excitedly recounts the Duke's romantic gesture. Watson narrows his eyes, murmuring that the situation seems far too sweet to be a mere coincidence. The carriage arrives at that moment to whisk them away from the storm. Charlotte thanks Jonathan and orders him to use the umbrella, though the gesture is futile as the poor knight is already drenched to the bone. He unties the mysterious knot and opens the canopy. But sometime later, the inevitable consequence strikes. Charlotte is baffled by her frailty. The saying goes, not even a dog catches a cold in the height of summer. The protagonist knows this body is weak, yet her mind circles back to the peculiar way that umbrella was tied. She searches her memory, realizing never actually witnessed the moment the cord was knotted. Catching herself making excuses for the Duke, she wonders if her heart is trying to absolve the blonde noble of suspicion. But logic prevails. Seeing his human side a few times does not change the fact that he remains the prime suspect in her demise. Meanwhile, Martha hovers anxiously, terrified by Her Highness's skyrocketing fever, ignoring her own suffering. Charlotte demanded to know if the apology letter was sent to Lady Blair regarding their cancelled tea time. Suddenly, a maid bursts in with urgent news a guest has arrived specifically to see the princess. Ever the protector, Martha insists that the princess had already canceled all appointments due to her illness. But fate plays its hand. The unannounced visitor is none other than Duke Arinius Adler himself. Martha finds the bedside visit impossibly romantic and rushes to usher him in. While Charlotte struggles to understand how her fiancé knew to come, Duke Adler steps into the chamber, his composure cracking for a split second at the sight of the princess's condition. Charlotte weakly apologizes for allowing him to see her in such a disheveled state. Regaining his poise, Arinius insists that he is the one at fault for invading her sanctuary without prior notice. The princess waves off the formality, explaining that her only regret is being unable to host him properly. Even so, the Duke feels compelled to justify his presence, declaring he is not the type of man who enters a lady's room on a whim. But Charlotte misses the nuance entirely, stating she doesn't mind men entering her chambers, a comment that strikes the Duke like a physical blow. He struggles to hide his shock, instantly tormented by the thought that other men might have been granted this privilege before him. Desperate to change the subject, Charlotte asks why he has come. There was no scheduled meeting, and her question is cut short by a violent fit of coughing. Panic flashes in Arinius's eyes as he asks if she is all right, but the princess simply wants to uncover the true reason for his unexpected visit. Duke Adler shifts uncomfortably, claims his presence is merely to retrieve the umbrella he lent her. The absurdity of the excuse strikes Charlotte, leaving her stunned in complete silence. Duke Adler stammers that it is a precious artifact, but the protagonist sees through the flimsy veil of his words. After all, why would the Grand Duke descend personally for a mere trinket? Furthermore, his hawk-like gaze has been sweeping the room. She shudders, convinced he is scouting the palace layout for a future assassination. Music. Regardless, Charlotte points to the item, explaining intended to return it. Arinius abruptly asks why her letters have ceased. Charlotte whispers that she wished to spare him the annoyance, fearing her affection was a burden. But his response shatters her expectations. He confesses he waited for her letters with bated breath. His voice drops low. Had he known of her illness through a letter, he would not have barged in so unceremoniously. Guilt washes over her. She promises to inform him next time, realizing this awkward dance is partly her doing. The music. Violent coughing fit returns, etching deep concern onto the Duke's stoic face. Arinius closes the distance instantly, ignoring her pleas to stay back lest he catch the fever. He leans in, invading her personal space until the maids gasp at the impropriety. Now close. Music. His hand brushes her hair to retrieve a stray petal. Charlotte exhales, thanking him for the gentle touch. At least, she reassures herself, he will not execute her here with so many witnesses watching. Her relief is cut short when the Duke encases her fragile wrist in his hand, noting her weakness. He murmurs darkly that her bones feel like glass, liable to shatter if he even squeezed. Her pulse races like a trapped bird. She blames the cold, though his proximity is the true cause. Arinius leans closer, whispering a myth a cold is cured only when passed to another. As her fiancé, he volunteers. Panic and anticipation war within her. Is he leaning in? But the moment is shattered when Martha bursts in with tea. The princess flusters, trying to recover, while the young man retreats into his icy persona. Music. Her heart still hammers against her ribs. Martha breaks the silence, pointing to the magnificent bouquet the Duke brought. Music. Gazing at the lovely blooms, the princess asks if they are hers. Arinius grunts, claiming he found them on the road. Then he stammers that they are from his garden. Charlotte blinks, confused by his clumsy lies. Abruptly, Arinius declares his mission complete. He turns to leave, commanding her to survive. It is surreal to hear words of care from the man she suspects is her destined killer. She calls out as he departs, but he is gone. He left the umbrella behind, proving his excuse was a complete fabrication. Alone again, she orders the flowers to the living room, claiming beauty belongs with beauty. In truth, she knows that the most vibrant flowers often hide the deadliest poisons. Perhaps this bouquet is the assassin's weapon she feared. Exhausted by the mental chess game, the protagonist collapses onto her bed. But peace is fleeting. Jonathan barges in, sees her state, and delivers his signature. I told you so. And rewind to hours earlier. The news of the princess's collapse had reached the ducal estate. It was Blair who broke the news. Having received a cancellation notice, Duke Adler fumes. Music. Insulted that his sister knew before him, despite the princess's bold confession of love, Blair rolls her eyes, urging him to act. He must bring flowers. It is the duty of a fiancé. The Duke hesitates, clinging to propriety. To visit a lady unannounced is a breach of etiquette. Blair scoffs at his density. She explains that a sick woman's heart is fragile, and she yearns for her beloved's presence above all else. She advises her brother to go and steal the cold from her, repeating the Academy's superstition that illness vanishes if passed to another. Arinius sighs, defeated, and agrees to rearrange his schedule with Alfred. Work piles high on his desk, and it is not their designated day. He worries she will misinterpret his visit. Music. God forbid anyone thinks he actually harbors affection for her. And so, conquering his pride, Arinius arrives at the princess's palace. As her rightful fiancé, he needed no excuse to invade her sanctuary. But the sight that greeted him stopped him cold, her fragile form, consumed by sickness. The warnings of his aides echoed in his mind that a fever could be shared through intimacy. A dark temptation took hold, drawing him closer to Charlotte's lips. But just as the distance closed, Martha's sharp voice cut through the tension. Arinius snapped back to reality, realizing the madness that had nearly consumed him. Suddenly, a heavy presence approached from the shadows, a greeting that carried more weight than simple courtesy. It was Charlotte's personal guard. Arinius narrowed his eyes. He recognized this man, the commoner prodigy from the Academy, the very one who had dared to carry his fiancée in his arms. So, this was the mongrel who had been granted access to Charlotte's private chambers. The Duke's gaze turned icy, demanding a silent explanation. Jonathan stood like a statue, stating simply that he was there to protect the princess. Jealousy flared in the noble's chest. "Do you visit her often?" Arinius sneered. "I do," the knight replied calmly, "though not nearly as often as you, your grace." It was a polite answer, yet it struck Arinius like a slap in the face. Before storming off, he cast a warning glare. "You had best guard my bride with your life." Meanwhile, back in the room, Jonathan faced the princess, who demanded updates despite her fever. The knight frowned, finding it deeply troubling that she prioritized work over her own survival. Yet, deep down, he knew this was the only reason he was allowed by her side. Jonathan sighed, his voice low. "Your Highness, could you not pretend, for one moment, that I came simply to care for your health?" Charlotte offered a weak, cynical smile. She pointed to the thick file in his hand. "Men who come for my health bring roses or fruit. Sir Jonathan, they do not bring a mountain of paperwork." The file contained the details of the third murder victim. It held the ledger of dark transactions and the tragic fate of the bakery owner. The victim had been a saint among sinners, a generous soul who volunteered in the wretched slums of Norwood, bringing bread to the starving. He had been on a mission of mercy that fateful day, when the darkness swallowed him whole. The princess's eyes widened. "To gather such secrets is no small feat," she whispered. "What is your method?" But the knight merely bowed, his lips sealed by confidentiality. In the end, Charlotte offered her thanks, promising to summon him once her strength returned. But her words were cut short by a violent fit of coughing. Jonathan's composed mask cracked. "The rain that day. It has taken its toll," he murmured. "Please, forget the investigation. Save yourself first." It was a lecture she had already endured from Martha, but hearing it from him hit differently. Defeated, the princess signaled for him to leave the documents on the table as he departed. But as she reached out, her strength betrayed her. Her hand trembled, and the heavy slipped, crashing to the floor in a chaotic sprawl. Jonathan paused. "Are you truly so weak that even paper is too heavy a burden?" His words were gentle, but shame burned hot on Charlotte's cheeks. "I will organize them," Sir Watson said softly. He gathered the scattered sheets, binding them with a swift, practiced motion before ordering her to rest. But as he turned to leave, something caught Charlotte's eye. It was the knot he had tied a specific, unique loop, a vital clue that blew the case wide open. The skills of the Norwood slums were often seen as a gift, but for men like him, they were a curse in disguise. No matter how their talent shone, the glass ceiling of the empire remained unbreakable. They were denied promotion, crushed under the heel of birthright. Even when they outperformed the elite, the glory was always stolen by the nobility. A commoner in the military academy was a rare breed, treated like dirt and looked down upon by the highborn heirs. After all, What noble would lower themselves to learn from a peasant? So, the talented poor were forced to settle for the scraps, low-ranking fodder for the imperial army. Even so, for people with nothing, it was the only path out of hell. But what they found in uniform was not honor, but a cesspool of corruption, atrocities committed in the name of the empire, while the noble officers turned a blind eye to the bloodshed. Jonathan, a man of conscience, could not stay silent. But when he raised his voice against the injustice, the system crushed him. He was dragged to trial, falsely accused of assaulting a superior officer. The nobles who gave the illicit orders sat in judgment, while the crimes they instigated were buried under lies. In the end, only the commoner paid the price. Stripped of his rank, Jonathan was left with nothing but a criminal record and a shattered reputation. He was drowning in the abyss until a hand reached out. The hand of the princess, a woman the world mocked. They called her the fool who chased Archduke Killian like a desperate puppy, a ridiculous figure whose very existence made the court sigh in exasperation. Their first meeting had seemed like a joke to him, a pampered princess trying to buy the loyalty of a disgraced soldier. But then she spoke words that shook his world. What happened to you was unjust. It was a shock to his system. Never in the history of the empire had a noble taken the side of a commoner against their own kind. His instincts screamed danger. Surely, there was a hidden agenda. Getting involved with royalty was a one-way ticket to the gallows. But the offer was a lifeline he could not refuse. He agreed, fully intending to sell her a fake loyalty just to survive. That was the plan. But contrary to the vicious rumors, Jonathan discovered the truth. She was not a fool, but a brilliant strategist with a humble heart. And terrifyingly, she was beginning to charm him for real. Yet, there was another truth that differed from the rumors he had heard. The whispers were wrong. Her heart did indeed beat for someone, a secret affection she harbored deep within. But it was not for Archduke Killian. Instead, her eyes were fixed on Duke Adler, a man so high above that commoners dared not even look at his shadow. However, he noticed the cruel reality. Charlotte received nothing but cold disdain from Adler, just as she had from Killian. In Count Morstan's garden, she stood surrounded by withered flowers, a tragic reflection of her own wilting spirit. Sir Watson felt a familiar, crushing sense of helplessness, his throat tight as he could only offer a few fragile words of comfort. That was the moment he spoke softly. The dress you wore at the last boutique, it captured your radiance far better. With the unspoken bond that now connects them, the loyal bodyguard wishes only to shield her from the freezing indifference of men who do not deserve her warmth. Snapping back to the present, Charlotte's expression shifts violently. It is a look of sheer terror, as if she has stared into the abyss. She has seen something that chills her blood, and Jonathan notices the shift instantly, his instincts flaring with alarm. He rushes to her side, panic rising in his chest as he asks if she is all right. Desperation grips him as he gently holds her face, searching for an answer. Even in his frantic state, Jonathan clings to the codes of honor, addressing her as Your Excellency, but Charlotte can barely force a whisper past her trembling lips. Suddenly, the princess gasps out two words. The knot. The bodyguard's eyes widen. He understands the reference immediately. The princess explains quickly. This is no ordinary binding. It is not a technique of the Empire Bao, but a specific style from Cortina. She reveals its terrifying nature. Because the knot is nearly unbreakable, the Imperial Army adopted it. It is a lingering habit he kept from his rigorous days at the Academy. Charlotte dives deeper into the abyss of her investigation, demanding to know if every soldier retains this habit even after graduation. But Jonathan clarifies that it is more of a personal preference. During the hellish training, it simply became second nature for his hands to form that shape. Now, the tables turn. Jonathan's gaze sharpens. Confused as to why a simple knot would cause such visible horror in her eyes, Charlotte drops the bombshell. The serial killer binding the victims uses a knot eerily similar to this one. The bodyguard freezes, asking the heavy question, does she suspect him of being the butcher? She quickly denies it. But the damage is done. It is obvious that Jonathan feels the sting of offense deep in his pride. After all, she is casting doubt on the very blade that has protected her and aided her hunt for the truth. Finally, Charlotte admits that for a split second, the shadow of doubt crossed her mind, but she returns to her senses, realizing it is impossible. When the first victim fell, Jonathan was stationed far away in Cortina with the Imperial Army. Still, indignance burns in his voice. The bodyguard presses on, asking if this casts suspicion on every soul who survived the academy. That would include Duke Adler himself, who carries that very knot on his umbrella. He emphasizes that no ordinary civilian possesses the skill to untie such a complex bind. And then, the realization strikes Jonathan like a physical blow. All this time, the person she has been tracking, the prime suspect in her mind, is the Duke. Charlotte is truly caught off guard, and her silence speaks volumes. She shocks him by admitting the terrifying truth. Jonathan bombards her with frantic questions. Since when has she harbored this dark theory? Did she see signs of the monster within the Duke? The princess lays out the chilling coincidences. Arinius is a man of 180 centimeters, possesses lethal military training, and had contact with the victims. Amidst this turmoil, the protagonist guards her deepest secret, the truth of her reincarnation, knowing it sounds like madness. At least now, the bodyguard understands the dangerous game she plays. She is investigating her own fiancé, determined to find out if he's a serial killer before she walks down the aisle. The weight of this revelation is nearly too much for Jonathan's mind to process. He realizes with a shudder that Charlotte is likely the only person in the entire empire who dares to suspect the Duke. That is why she has moved in silence. Charlotte looks him in the eye. All she needs is for him to remain her sword and shield in this investigation. That was, after all, their sacred agreement. Yet, Jonathan needs to know. Why now? Why reveal the deadly truth to him at this moment? The princess softens. It is because trust has bloomed in the wasteland. Even though she bought his loyalty with coin, Jonathan has proven his faith is genuine. However, he presses her. Why would she place such dangerous trust in him based only on surface actions? Charlotte answers, her voice trembling with emotion, because you are someone who would never leave me alone in the freezing rain. That is a warmth that cannot be bought with gold. Hearing this confession, Jonathan feels the heat rise to his face. He stammers, asking the inevitable question, does she not hold love for Duke Adler? Before she can answer, her frail body betrays her. A violent coughing fit seizes the princess, shaking her frame. Jonathan moves instantly, grabbing a cup of water, his heart racing with worry for her fragile health. Recovering her breath, Charlotte asks with a bitter smile if she looks mad enough to love a monster who hunts innocent lives. Regardless of feelings, she needs her bodyguard to help catch the true culprit. If the trail of blood leads to Duke Adler, she vows to expose him to the world before the wedding bells ring. Jonathan straightens his posture. Since he was bought, he must repay the debt. He swears a solemn oath to aid her, even if it means his body is shattered in the process. But Charlotte shakes her head. She does not wish for such a tragic sacrifice. Still, Watson insists, if blood must be spilled, let it be his. He is strong. He can recover. But the protagonist looks at him with soft eyes, reminding him that she bought his loyalty, not his life. Her heart aches at the thought of him ruining his health for her sake. A wave of relief washes over Charlotte as the medicine finally takes effect, calming her anxious nerves. Fatigue pulls at her eyelids. She dismisses the powerful warriors to get some rest, and even loyal Jonathan agrees she needs peace. The bodyguard gently tucks her in, vowing to handle the shadows while she sleeps. Days drift by until finally, music. Charlotte returns to the battlefield of her office. Her sharp eyes scrutinize the third victim, a bakery owner beloved by the common folk, a saint who fed the poor in the slums. Yet try as she might, she cannot find a single thread connecting this man to Duke Adler. His world was filled with schools and humble restaurants, far removed from the cold intrigue of the nobility. But the numbers tell a different story. Charlotte frowns, suspicious of how a simple bakery generated an empire's worth of profit. Music. The math does not add up. Expenses are too low, profits too high, and the princess senses a vital clue slipping through her fingers. A ghostly irregularity in the transaction records haunts her thoughts. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaks open, interrupting her intense focus. Martha arrives with destiny in her hands, a letter from Arinius regarding their next rendezvous. The Duke has left the location entirely up to Charlotte. A spark of cunning lights up her eyes. This is the golden opportunity she has been waiting for. Martha suggests a romantic boat ride or a theater play to suit the summer breeze, but the princess something different. She declares she wants to taste the life of a commoner, leaving her maid completely stunned. Charlotte drops another bombshell, demanding to borrow a maid's humble attire for the date. When the fateful day arrives, she beams with excitement, suggesting a stroll down Baker Street, though the Duke's face instantly sours at the idea. Arinius is baffled. He sees no value in such a gritty place and demands to know her true intentions. Secretly, Charlotte knows that Street holds the key to the mystery, but she feigns innocence, claiming friends told her it was charming. Music. Duke Adler freezes. He had no idea his noble fiancé associated with commoners. Panic flashes in Charlotte's eyes. She quickly uses Martha as her shield, claiming she is the friend in question, since she truly has no one else. Arinius softens, realizing a maid can indeed be a friend, but then his gaze shifts to the looming bodyguard. He concedes that walking with a maid is acceptable, but for two nobles to wander those streets alone, he deems it too dangerous. Charlotte unleashes her ultimate weapon. She pleads with wide, shimmering eyes, begging for this one wish. Powerless against her charm, the cold Duke crumbles and agrees, earning sweet praise for his benevolent heart. Arinius moves to have his secretary book a luxury restaurant, but Charlotte stops him. She wants the raw and unfiltered experience. Confusion is written all over the Duke's handsome face. Then she delivers the final blow. She whispers that she simply wants to be alone with him. The stoic Duke turns bright red, flustered by her bold romance. But before they can step into the common world, they must disguise his blinding nobility. Tazik. The shopkeeper panics, realizing a high noble has entered his humble store. Charlotte steps in, demanding plain men's clothing that will let him blend into the shadow. Arinius hesitates, but the princess insists. His natural radiance is too powerful. He would shine like a diamond in the rough streets. Understanding the assignment, the shopkeeper scurries to find the most discreet outfit possible. Arinius looks at the cheap fabric with alien eyes, having never worn anything off the rack. Charlotte finds his confusion adorable and eagerly pushes him toward the changing room. As the shopkeeper assists him, Charlotte overhears gasps of admiration. They marvel at his bulging muscles and sculpted chest, praising skin so perfect it defies logic. Listening from outside, Charlotte smirks. She realizes that relaxed clothes on a godlike physique only make Arinius the most irresistible man in the entire empire. Suddenly, her heart skips a beat. The curtain parts. Even in peasant rags, his beauty is overwhelming. Arinius tugs at the fabric, complaining about the fit. Music. He feels restricted. The shopkeeper explains that on the Duke, even cheap cloth looks like a royal uniform, but Arinius ignores the praise. He only cares for one opinion. Charlotte, face burning with a blush, can barely stutter that he looks absolutely magnificent. Adler questions her intently. Charlotte stammers, "Music, at first sight," leaving Ren to echo her words in confusion. The princess quickly shifts gears. She gushes that he looks absolutely stunning at first glance, claiming it suits her taste perfectly to hide her blunder. But in the depths of her heart, the truth remained unspoken. What she truly wanted to confess was that it felt like love at first sight. She had spoken those words casually 1,000 times before, yet now, with him, the words caught in her throat, refusing to be set free. The shopkeeper cuts through the thick atmosphere, sensing a sale. He eagerly asks if they intend to purchase the ensemble. Arinius does not hesitate. He orders not just the suit on his back, but the entire inventory of the store, a purchase that barely makes a dent in his vast fortune. To a man of his stature, the entire shop costs less than a single button on his coat. Our protagonist realizes the absurdity of the moment. It is the classic cliche of a possessive boyfriend spoiling his partner. But perhaps, underneath that cold exterior, the Duke possesses a greedy desire to own everything that catches his eye. Music. Dressed to kill, he is finally ready for Baker Street. Together, they venture into a district no self-respecting noble would ever dare to tread. Arinius asks for their destination, and Charlotte points without hesitation. She has her sights set on a specific restaurant. This is no casual date. It is a calculated move in her investigation, targeting a key client found in the bakery's secret ledgers. This establishment has a long history of importing breads and desserts from the very place she is investigating. It is time for Sherlock Holmes to begin her work alongside her unwitting Watson. Poor Arinius has absolutely no clue he is part of a scheme. Charlotte places her order with precision. A well-done steak keeping the picky blonde nobleman in mind, plus a basket of bread and a chocolate dessert. The waitress scribbles down the request, promising to return in the blink of an eye. The moment they are alone, Duke Adler cannot help but scoff. Even the harsh conditions of his military days were more luxurious than this cramped hovel. The princess giggles at his discomfort, finding the novelty thrilling. But for Reincarnated, stepping into the unknown brings no joy, only wary suspicion. Charlotte leans in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She promises that this escapade will remain a secret. Just between the two of them, she confesses her history of sneaking out to commoner districts, referencing the infamous drunken scandal in Norwood that crowned her the delinquent princess. However, the details fade into the background for the Duke. All that matters is that they now share a secret, binding them closer together. Moments later, their meal arrives. Charlotte takes a bite, and her eyes narrow. The taste of the bread is wrong. The waitress explains the change, noting it has been a while since her last visit. They were forced to switch suppliers recently. Tragically, the kind-hearted owner of the small bakery they relied on met with a terrible accident. Horror washes over Charlotte. She samples the cake, noting its cloying sweetness, a sharp contrast to the balanced flavors of the old bakery. The waitress confirms her suspicion. These new desserts are far sweeter than what they used to serve. She describes the previous treats as having an addictive quality, a sweetness so profound it felt like falling under a magical spell with every bite. The crown jewel of that lost bakery was their vanilla cream, a flavor that was nothing short of legendary. Reincarnated catches the gleam in his fiancé's eyes. Sensing her intense interest, he asks if she has visited that bakery personally. The princess quickly deflects, claiming she only heard tales of the delicious bread from Martha. It is a world the Duke knows nothing about. Such trivial matters as bakeries are far beneath his notice. He coolly remarks that she need not concern herself with his interests. Charlotte shoots back a playful retort, at least, not for now. After all, as the future mistress of his household, she argues that understanding ingredients is part of her duty. The implication hits him like a physical blow. The Duke actually chokes, startled by the image of her ruling his home. But as the words leave her lips, she freezes. Why did she say that in her mind? She is destined to die long before that future comes to pass. Pushing the dark thoughts aside, she inquires further. Reincarnated reveals his household is currently under his stepmother's iron, though they will confront her soon. Charlotte steers the conversation back to safety. She admits the restaurant defied her expectations. Yet, the tragedy of the bakery owner weighs on her. She subtly probes for more details regarding the accident. Seeing her curiosity, the Duke offers to investigate the matter later. His genuine reaction confirms to Charlotte that he is truly in the dark. She notices the blonde nobleman has not touched his food. When he brushes off his hunger, Charlotte insists he must at least try the cake, tempting him with its flavor. Music. She lifts a forkful, offering it directly to his lips. Reincarnated stiffens, completely bewildered by this intimate gesture. She has to coach him like a child, telling him to say, "Aw." The Duke's composure crumbles, terrified of such a public display of affection. But Charlotte insists this is standard protocol for a date. With a mischievous smile, she moves the fork closer, ready to feed the flustered Duke. Before he can protest, the princess boldly shoves the slice of cake into his mouth, demanding a verdict. He mumbles that it is incredibly sweet. She takes a bite herself, agreeing with a calm smile that somehow sends a sudden flush of heat rising to the Duke's cheeks. This is the art of assertion, a psychological trap designed to extract the truth from unsuspecting lips using known facts. When a person is questioned directly, their defenses instantly rise, suspicious of the hidden intent behind the inquiry. Music. But human nature is a funny thing. It possesses an irresistible urge to correct the errors of others. Drop a casual lie into the conversation, and they will rush to fix it, often spilling far more truth than they ever intended. Charlotte's sharp eyes had caught a discrepancy in the small bakery's ledgers. There were 0 records for sugar or spices. For a bakery, these ingredients are the very heart of their trade, yet their profits were sky high with absolutely no expense for raw materials. She had laid the trap. If they baked without sugar since their vanilla cream was famous, a blatant contradiction she knew he should catch. However, the details seemed to bore Reincarnated, even though he had deliberately fed her false information earlier regarding the victim's gender and the cause of death. Charlotte narrowed her eyes. Was he a mastermind, dodging her trap, or was he truly oblivious to the web being spun? Reincarnated suddenly cuts through her thoughts, asking with a smirk if she plans to praise his beauty. Charlotte admits he is indeed handsome. The princess observes that sweets don't seem to suit his palate, a fact the Duke readily admits. Feigning innocence, Charlotte claims a love for sugar and asks if it is a luxury here. The Duke grows serious, explaining it is a monopoly privilege held by the crown and high nobility. And the keeper of those keys is none other than Marquis d'Aust, the Empress's own family. By a chilling coincidence, the Marquise's secretary was the fourth victim in the serial killer case. A dark suspicion takes root. Is there a hidden link? But she shelves the thought. Their date is far from over. The pair moves through the bustling streets to their next destination. Arinius asks where she is leading him, and the princess reveals that a new tavern has risen from the ashes of the old bakery. Charlotte hops onto a stool and boldly 2 whiskeys on ice, but the Duke intercepts, reminding her that midday drinking is hardly proper. Charlotte waves off his concern with a mischievous grin, promising she won't land in a prison cell this time, and raises a glass to toast his captivating eyes. Effortlessly, she charms the bartender, steering the conversation toward the building's history. Seizing the opening, Charlotte mentions the previous owner had no kin. The bartender nods, eager to share the gossip. He explains the deceased woman was an outsider, her origins shrouded in mystery, known only for her gentle heart before tragedy struck. Glancing over, Charlotte is stunned to see Arinius has drained his glass. When offered a refill, he declines, admitting the room is already spinning. At a nearby table, the atmosphere grows heavy with the tension of high-stakes gambling. The bartender whispers a warning to look away. Those are loan sharks, predators who lure desperate souls into rigged games to shackle them with debt. Memories of her past life surface in a flash. She recognizes the scam instantly: illegal gambling rings that devour the weak and violate every law of the land. But her gaze lingers too long. A rough voice barks out, demanding to know what she is staring at, his tone dripping with disrespect toward the princess. The thug scrapes his chair back and stomps toward them. The bartender stammers apologies, but the princess sits unmoved while the hothead screams that she must have lost her mind. Music. He sneers at her attire, mocking her for looking like a common peasant. The protagonist weighs her options should she laugh it off and brace for the consequences. Her fragile body wouldn't withstand a blow from a brute like him, but the strike never lands. In a blur of motion, Arinius catches the thug's arm. Music. His grip is iron, crushing the man's wrist until he weakens. You possess a dangerous amount of audacity, Arinius growls. The Duke's eyes are cold as ice. Touch her with those filthy hands again, and you lose them. Music. Suddenly, another goon lunges, intending to blindside him. But Arinius is a soldier forged in war. He sweeps the attacker off his feet effortlessly. Music, drawing the rest of the pack like wolves to fresh meat. The Duke weaves through a punch with supernatural grace. The crowd gasps, and Charlotte realizes the legends of his military prowess were no exaggeration. Yet anxiety prickles at her skin. If this brawl escalates, it will draw unwanted attention they cannot afford. Desperate to save his shop, the bartender pleads for order, begging them to settle this like honorable men with a traditional duel. He points to the cards scattered on the table, signaling that this battle will be fought not with fists, but with wits. The opponent radiates arrogance, convinced victory is already in his grasp. Arinius sits there, stone-faced, while Charlotte watches with bated breath, silently praying her betrothed will fold before it is too late. The loan shark sneers, asking if the Duke even understands the rules of the game. Seeing Arinius downing whiskey as if it were mere water, Charlotte realizes she must put an end to this farce immediately. She demands to know his plan, for at this rate, he is sprinting toward total ruin. The blonde companion whispers urgently, reminding everyone that gambling was strictly forbidden back at the academy, a fact that becomes painfully obvious, considering this amateur just allowed the sharks to claim the Duke's precious watch. The protagonist shudders. If this continues, he will be stripped down to his undergarments. As the cards align against him, it seems the Duke is literally about to lose his trousers. Arinius calmly asks if she has anything left to wager. The princess stares in disbelief. Is he truly planning to continue when he stands on the precipice of the abyss? His expression sends a chill down her spine. It is the same hollow look she used to see on the faces of hopeless gambling addicts during her investigations. The protagonist shifts her gaze, locking eyes with another figure in the room. It is the debtor from earlier, broken and exploited. He laments getting entangled with these fifth-rate thieves. Charlotte commands her fiancé to stand down, announcing a substitution the players are changing. Her declaration stuns the table into silence, which is quickly broken by the raucous laughter of the criminals. One of the thugs sneers, well, look at the tough guy. Is your little girlfriend stepping in to fight your battles now? He turns his predatory gaze to Charlotte, asking for her stake. Without hesitation, she slams a magnificent brooch onto the table, ready to duel for her fiancé's lost honor. The game begins, and these lowlifes are about to taste the bitter flavor of despair. Charlotte reveals her hand a perfect full house in a single stroke. She reclaims the Duke's watch from the enemy's clutches. Stunned, the blonde companion stammers, asking how she pulled off such a miracle. She brushes it off as merely the result of refined upbringing. But in reality, it is a technique she mastered from a scoundrel she arrested for running an illegal casino in her previous life. Those dens of iniquity were always bustling, and during 2 intense undercover operations, she absorbed every trick needed to evade detection. Utilizing those very skills, she once put over 20 criminals behind bars. Now, the entire room watches in awe of her terrifying proficiency. Charlotte's eyes gleam with intensity. "Let's go all in," she declares, pushing every chip and asset into the center of the table. The loan shark scoffs, mocking her bravery as impressive but questioning if she has the spine to face the consequences. Charlotte fires back coolly, they can quit now if he is afraid. However, the princess demands a formal contract before the final cards are dealt. The villain agrees, but his terms are vile. If she wins, the debts vanish, but if she loses, she must sell her very body to settle the score. He slams his cards down, revealing a devastating sequence right out of the gate. A straight flush. The shark grins wickedly, warning the girl that overconfidence will be her undoing. But Charlotte merely smiles. The true show is just beginning. She flips her cards, sending a shockwave through the room that leaves everyone, especially the Duke, thunderstruck. The princess holds the unbeatable hand a royal straight flush. Victory is absolute. Charlotte snatches up the contract and retorts, "Perhaps you are the one who should not have been so confident." As the afternoon sun fades, the man who had been tormented by the loan sharks approaches her, his voice trembling with gratitude for saving his life. Charlotte sternly advises him to never treat with such scum again. She hands him the contract, showing him that his chains have been broken and the debts erased. She knows he did not gamble out of greed, but out of desperate necessity to save his ailing son. Her heart aches for him. No father should have to endure the agony of watching his child suffer, a pain Charlotte understands all too well. She presses her valuable brooch into his hand, insisting he use it for medicine. She knows that erasing debt is meaningless if the child still lacks what he needs to survive. Tears stream down the man's face, blurring his vision. He can barely comprehend such benevolence from a stranger, pouring out his soul in thanks. He begs for the name of his savior so he might repay her one day, but the princess gently refuses, telling him that caring for his family is repayment enough. She bids him farewell. When they are finally alone, Renius breaks the silence, asking if she's always this dangerously generous. First she saved Blair, and now this stranger. He questions if she realizes that in this harsh world, such kindness rarely yields a return. But for her, it was never about profit. Her body simply moves on its own whenever injustice unfolds before her eyes. The Duke falls silent, reflecting on the strange and fascinating events he has witnessed in this district. Charlotte apologizes for dragging him into this chaotic mess and fears she made him uncomfortable, promising to be more careful in the future. To her surprise, Renius admits that thanks to her, he actually enjoyed the spectacle. He confesses it was the first time he had ever seen cards shuffled with such divine speed and grace. Relief washes over her. Charlotte had been terrified he might banish her from his sight until their wedding day. The princess explains with a humble smile that her hands simply move faster than the eye can follow. She starts to say she was worried about offending his dignity, but the conversation is cut short as the Duke's attention suddenly shifts to something in the distance. Suddenly, Duke Arinius yanks the princess into his protective embrace. Startled, she demands to know what is wrong, only for him to whisper a chilling warning they are being hunted. Charlotte trembles, wondering if it is merely a drunkard from the tavern earlier. But Renius's eyes darken. If only they were so lucky. No. If their pursuer is someone who knows their true royal identities, this is not just harassment. It is a potential catastrophe. His hand slips into his vest, retrieving a concealed weapon. His voice is ice cold as he murmurs that he hoped to end this night without spilling blood. Charlotte gasps, asking when he armed himself. He smirks. Did you truly think I would walk these dangerous streets with you completely defenseless? He grips his fiancée tighter, shielding her body with his own, but the predator is closing in. The Duke steals a glance backward and his expression hardens. They need to move. Now. One look transmits the silent command. Run. As they dash into the night, the shadow behind them accelerates, matching their desperate pace. Rainius refuses to let go of Charlotte's hand, his eyes scanning frantically for cover, his weapon ready to strike down anything that threatens her. A glint of steel reveals his dagger. Rainius spots a narrow alleyway and violently pulls his fiancée inside, pressing them into the shadows. The maneuver works. The pursuer loses their trail. Hidden in the darkness, the Duke wraps his arms around the princess, becoming her living shield. Pressed against his chest, Charlotte can hear the thunderous rhythm of his heart. Outside, the assassin grumbles a terrifying vow. Failing, this mission means his own death. She whispers, asking if it is the enemy they fear, but her fiancé silences her with a desperate gesture. Footsteps are thundering toward their hiding spot. Music. The shadow looms over them, but Rainius moves with the speed of a viper. He strikes hard, and the assailant collapses to the cold ground in an instant. With the threat neutralized, Rainius demands to know if she recognizes the man's face, but before she can answer, a new danger arises. More footsteps approach from the fog. Reinforcements. The Duke's grip tightens on his weapon. If this turns into a brawl, he will show no mercy. Meanwhile, Charlotte refuses to be a damsel in distress. Her hands close around a discarded wooden club, ready to fight for their lives. Even in this tense moment, the Duke glances at her makeshift weapon with concern, begging her to be careful not to injure her delicate hands. The steps stop right in front of them. Rainius raises his weapon for the kill, but suddenly freezes. The intruder recognizes him. It isn't an enemy at all. It is Alfred, his loyal secretary. The Duke sighs, the tension leaving his body, scolding the man for following too closely. Alfred explains, panting, that panic set in the moment his master vanished into the dark alleyways. Music. Rainius explains their evasion was necessary due to a tale. Glancing at the unconscious man, at least it seems he was not a professional assassin. However, the thug will be interrogated thoroughly. As the adrenaline fades, Charlotte realizes something shocking. Alfred was following them the entire time. Rainius confirms it with a wry smile. He gently reminds his fiancée that she clearly has not grasped the immense danger of her status as a royal figure. Charlotte pouts, feeling a wave of guilt. In her excitement, she had completely forgotten the burdens of her crown. Seeing her distress, the Duke softens. He admits the date was thrilling regardless, though he teases that seeing her swing that club would have been the highlight of his night. His eyes curve into a gentle, affectionate smile, and in that moment, our lovely protagonist feels her heart sparkle with a new emotion. Days pass after the chaos on Baker Street. Charlotte plunges into a hellish schedule, preparing for the upcoming Imperial Federation banquet. It is a mental battlefield. She must memorize the intricate history and etiquette of every participating delegation until her head spins. Thankfully, her past life as a student gave her the ultimate weapon exam cramming skills. Suddenly, a familiar voice cuts through her focus. Your Highness. It is Sir Jonathan Watson, her devoted knight, standing vigil outside. Shocked, the princess asks if he has been standing in the scorching heat. He simply smiles, claiming the shade was enough, and that waiting for her is never a hardship. His loyalty makes her cheeks flush pink. Trying to maintain composure, Charlotte announces good news regarding the security protocols. Due to strict Federation rules, personal guards are banned from the venue. She tells him to take the day off and finally rest. But for a knight, this is a nightmare. Jonathan's face falls as he demands to know who will ensure her safety. She assures him the Imperial Palace has total control. Music. His expression darkens as he realizes who her escort will be, the Duke. Charlotte confirms it, confused by his intensity. Jonathan snaps, asking if she's not being recklessly naive. His voice rises in agitation. He reminds her of the near-death experience on Baker Street. Does she not realize the danger might be coming from the very man beside her? But Charlotte's hands are tied. She cannot bring a guard, and she certainly cannot push away Duke Adler. Watson presses her, desperate. Why must she take such insane risks just to gather evidence? How can she explain the horrifying truth? In the original story, she is destined to be the 8th victim. Even if Duke Adler is the prime suspect, fleeing is not an option. She must find the real killer or face her doom. With a heavy sigh, the princess explains the political reality. She cannot shun her own fiancé without cause, especially when that man is the powerful Duke Adler. Defeated by her logic, the knight turns his face away, unable to hide his frustration and fear. Before the tension can boil over, her maid Martha arrives to intervene. Finally, the fateful day of the Imperial Union banquet dawns. The palace is a whirlwind of frantic ensuring perfection, and amidst the chaos, Charlotte emerges, looking absolutely breathtaking. Martha was practically vibrating with euphoria, declaring she always knew this gown was destiny. She beamed with pride at preparing such a masterpiece, especially since the princess hadn't graced a banquet in what felt like an eternity. The last time the world saw the true Charlotte, it was a disaster, a fleeting, disgraceful moment that ended with her being expelled from the embassy for her unruly behavior. Anxiously, Charlotte asked about the Duke. The maid assumed his schedule was packed as always, yet she swore he would be there to escort her. And true to his word, he arrived. Her Highness's breath hitched. Looking at the Duke, she had to admit he was like a deity descended to earth, a radiant aura blinding her with his presence. Yet, suppressing the storm in her heart, she managed only a simple whisper, "You look magnificent." Rainius returned the gaze, his eyes softening. He told her she was breathtaking, and that the dress seemed woven from the stars just for her. A flush rose to her cheeks as she thanked him for choosing such an exquisite garment. Charlotte made it clear she knew the blonde nobleman had paid a fortune for this. It felt extravagant, perhaps too much so, yet her fiancé seemed delightfully oblivious to her hesitation. The princess quickly clarified that she wasn't complaining, she was only expressing her deepest gratitude, smoothly. He deflected the praise, insisting the credit belonged to the artisan's hands, not his wallet. His modesty drew a genuine smile from her, but sensing the restless energy in the air, Adler asked if the palace was in disarray. Charlotte sighed, explaining that the event preparations had left everything in chaos. Seizing the moment, Rainius dropped his voice. He had news about the shadow that tailed them on Baker Street. The spy belonged to Prince Frederick, an incompetent fool, perhaps, but bold enough to confess that Charlotte's own brother had orchestrated the entire stalking operation. Charlotte could feel the air grow heavy around the blonde Duke. A terrifying, murderous vibration began to radiate from him. However, her mind remained tactical. Her primary concern was simple: was the pursuer merely hunting for information? She knew Frederick harbored deep resentment towards her, barely hiding his disdain at their meetings. Now, he was circling like a vulture, looking for any weakness to exploit. The captive claimed no intent to harm, and Charlotte believed it. He carried a dagger, yet drew it. Music. Clearly, immediate violence wasn't the goal. To strike a member of the royal family carried a death sentence. So, music? He wouldn't dare move without absolute certainty. Frederick was playing the long game, tasking his spy only with gathering dirt. Rainius offered a cold solution. With the spy's confession in hand, she had the power to drag this scandal before the imperial court. Charlotte hesitated. The mere thought of music publicly accusing a prince of the empire left her mind reeling. The Duke urged her on. It was a golden opportunity. They had a witness, and he promised he would shield her from any backlash Frederick might unleash. But Charlotte saw the bigger picture. Spies were common currency in the palace's shadow wars. Since no blood was shed, the protagonist reasoned that exposing this wouldn't destroy her brother. Instead, it would backfire. It would stain the nobility's honor, especially revealing that a princess was skinking around Baker Street disguised as a commoner. Thus, she chose silence. They had returned unharmed, and she refused to complicate the web further. Reluctantly, Duke Adler bowed to her wisdom. Still, his eyes remained sharp. He warned her to tread carefully around the prince's vipers for the foreseeable future. Hearing such tender concern from the very man destined to be responsible for her end sent a shiver down her spine. It was this confusing warmth that made Charlotte lower her defenses, even against the main suspect of her potential demise. Inside, the gala was in full swing, blissfully ignorant of the shadow outside. That is, until the herald's voice boomed, announcing the arrival of the princess and the Duke. As they stepped into the light, they were blinding. a celestial pair that commanded the gaze of every soul in the room. The air grew heavy with judgment, hundreds of eyes bored into them, and Charlotte, music, felt a cold sweat of nervousness prickle her skin. Amidst the sea of faces, one figure stood like a monolith. Madame Taylor, the Emperor's own sister and the iron-fisted ruler of the Empire's commerce. Music, swallowing her nerves, Charlotte approached and offered a graceful greeting to her formidable aunt. The older woman didn't mince words. "Last time, you couldn't even meet my gaze," she remarked. Noting that her niece's taste had improved since that past disaster, Charlotte managed a polite, agreeing laugh. "I hear you've become quite impressive," the madam added. Charlotte braced herself, fully expecting the stinging lash of sarcasm to follow. But the lady continued gravely. The royal family owed a debt. Rumors swirled that this young niece had saved the lives of several nobles, and perhaps even the emperor himself. The princess stood stunned. The madam wasn't mocking her, she was listing victories. Specifically, Charlotte's brilliant solution to the grain surplus, converting the excess into alcohol. Rainia stepped in smoothly, confirming that it was indeed Charlotte who masterminded the solution. A glint of interest flashed in the aunt's eyes, holding the rights to the liquor trade. This idea was a potential goldmine for her. Yet, in the shadows, whispers slithered among the jealous guests, claiming her brilliance was nothing more than dumb luck. Then, a shockwave ripples through the room. The Emperor's sister personally extends an invitation to Charlotte for her private tea party, confessing she is desperate to meet her. It might sound like a simple social call, but make no mistake, this tea party is a ruthless political battlefield for the Empire's most powerful women. Securing an invitation is proof that Charlotte has ascended to the absolute peak of high society. With this one move, Charlotte has officially entered the war for the throne. The very nobles who once looked down on her now flock to her side like moths to a flame, showering her with endless praise. She notices the princess is adorned in an exclusive piece from the EMR boutique, a stark contrast to the cold humiliation she endured at Lady Morstan's debutante ball. Suddenly, a new figure steps into her orbit. The man bows elegantly, introducing himself as Derek von Linderman. Charlotte hadn't anticipated becoming the center of this storm, but she had steeled her heart for this very moment. Music, sharp as ever, the princess reveals she knows exactly who he is, displaying a terrifyingly accurate knowledge of his business dealings in the kingdom of Demios. But Renia steps in like a glacial wall, abruptly cutting the conversation short. He insists the princess must prepare for the royal event, demanding their immediate departure. Derek attempts to bow out gracefully, expressing hope that their paths will cross again. But the Duke crushes that hope instantly, coldly stating that such a meeting will never happen. The moment the Lord retreats, Charlotte questions their hasty exit. Yet, Renius remains rigid, insisting that the schedule allows for no deviations. When Charlotte laments missing her chance to speak with Derek, her fiancé turns to her with a dark intensity, asking if there was really any reason for them to talk. Unsettled by the strange edge in his voice, the princess denies it immediately, but the damage is done. Music. Renius's composure cracks, revealing a simmering rage. He hisses that he absolutely loathes those who dare to overstep their boundaries. To Charlotte, it feels less like politics and more like possessiveness, as if Lord Linderman had dared to touch something that belongs solely to the Duke. He knows the tension runs deeper than just her, likely fueled by their bitter dispute over mining rights. But suddenly, another voice cuts through the heavy air. It is Archduke Killian. The atmosphere turns suffocating as the men exchange glares of pure disdain. Caught between these titans, what fate awaits our princess at the banquet? And that brings us to the end of today's